over 0%. You know, if my seatbelt was only 80% effective, I'd still fasten it.
Yeah.
But like, there's a lot of like, wow. And one guy said he won't take the vaccine, not because he thinks it's a poison or anything, but he sees it as an infringement of his rights. And he's like, it's not even 100% effective. I'm like, so few things are. You
Yeah,
know?
almost nothing is 100% effective.
Yeah. That's why I always object when people go around going, you've got to give 110% or you might as well do nothing. I'm like,
That's
no.
impossible.
Not only is it impossible, but like 80% is really good. Like 80% is awesome. Like,
And also the conversation is like 80% effective against what? So we
yeah,
know that, okay, you have that much less chance of catching it, but what less chance does it make of it becoming a deadly
yeah.
encounter with the virus? Like, does it
Like
strengthen your immune system so that if you do actually catch it,
you're
you're
less likely
less
to.
likely to go to the
Mm,
hospital, something like that?
that's a huge point. That's a huge point, Dusty, because we know that this disease ain't going nowhere, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's still
not
going
going
to
to
be around for a
disappear.
while.
Yeah,
It's
well,
mutating. We're going to have to keep creating these new vaccines for these new
well,
mutations.
in the
It's going to
end,
be around.
in the end, I think it's the human body that will deal with it over time. Just like because like flu has never gone away, has it? Like people
No,
die
it's
of
just
flu
here.
every year. Thousands of people die of flu every year. The thing
Hmm.
is that this is a different scale because our bodies have just never ever been exposed. Over
Hmm.
many years, millions and millions and millions and millions of people will get it. Millions of those will survive. Some will not. But of the ones that survive, bit by bit, they will breed a herd, a general herd immunity. So we
Yeah.
won't be. I don't think we're going to be in like lockdown every year, but I do think there's going to be there'll be people who'll get ill and die of this kind of variety, probably for the rest of our lives.
Well, it's not like this is our first rodeo with coronavirus. We've
No.
been dealing with coronavirus since, the first recorded uh,
Yeah.
common colds. So this is something that we will. It's not like this virus itself, its classification will go away. Like some
No.
flus are more deadlier than the others,
Yeah. That's
and
it.
that's some coronaviruses are more deadlier than others as well as we've seen this past year.
Correct. So yeah. Sorry, I was way off track.
Oh, it's all right. I'm still like getting the links out here.
But I find
Trying
you a
to.
very soothing person to talk to, Dusty, because I think you're someone who doesn't, you're not easily just swayed. You have your own views, but you put yourself across in such a calm, effortless, and non combative manner, which I find very, very helpful because I love to discuss and I love to hear other opinions and thoughts, but I do not enjoy arguing for argument's sake.
Well, I always try to keep the idea open that I don't know everything, and it's best to be uncertain than certain.
Yeah.
Because when you
Well,
run into having too much certainty about something, then you just get really fervent and
yeah. You become a
ideological
white
about it.
cloak.
Yeah, I just like to leave it open and say, hey, maybe this, maybe that. I could be wrong.
But yeah.
Who knows? I just don't like to get super certain about things. Just like have to question, but not question everything because there
No.
comes a point where if you're questioning everything, you just believe in nothing, right?
Agreed. And you have to have a point of view and a stance, and that's what I like about you, Dusty. Is like you're not afraid or like uncertain of your opinions. You're like these are my opinions. This is why I think them, but you just aren't a white cloak about it. You're
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah, there's a possibility that if you present reasonable arguments to me, I may change my position. But there are some people who just like no
yeah.
position. There's a possibility, and they're like, whoa. Like I have one guy who, to completely change the topic, I have one guy over here in England. Like the premier sport is football, soccer,
Hmm.
and like people supporting football teams is a big deal. It's a cultural thing, and it's a frequent discussion topic in almost all environments. And there's one guy who's constantly loves to attack other people's football teams for being rubbish, but he himself supports no one. And I'm like, yeah, because normally the point is you can diss other people's teams and they can diss yours, and it's like a to and fro. But he's like, no, I have no opinion. I stand on no hill, so I'm just attacking everyone, but no one can attack me because I don't exist. And I think that's the thing I dislike. Like, I think you should have an opinion. You should have an idea of what you think is right, but be willing to change it.
Yeah. I just try to give people an out, and I try not to make it a conversation about my morals versus somebody else's.
Yeah.
It's like giving someone, like not allowing someone to have a moral out is why people get so heated in conversations.
Is that why you have woke centrist as one of your tags?
Yeah, it's like it just makes no sense. Like woke centrist, what does that mean? It means that I don't like to. Well, the thing they say is a fence sitter. It's not me fence sitting. It's me considering two options and trying to think my way through those two options instead of, going down a list and writing a check mark due to ideology. It's like, okay, these guys have some interesting things here to say, and so do these guys. Let's hear them out and have a discussion about it.
Rather than, if you happen to have this color politics, you are always right, and this color politics, therefore you are always wrong.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I've seen a lot of that this last year. Whew.
Yeah, I try to, like, whenever I ask political questions, I try to do it neutrally.
Yeah.
I try to exclude blaming a group for anything.
Yeah, concentrate on individuals and actual facts.
Yeah, and usually I base it based off of narratives, not based off of which group is talking about the narrative. Like, I think one of the most recent ones I had posted about was election fraud, and I was providing some information. I wasn't blaming anybody. Yeah, I wasn't blaming anybody, but I was just I found this podcast of two lawyers that went through all the cases, and I don't care who is giving out the misinformation.
Yeah.
I don't care which side is doing it. I just rather people have
information,
more truth. Yeah, like more truth. Like if once I'll go against any side that's actively trying to fool somebody into believing something. And in this case, the whole election fraud thing. But I listened to, it was an hour and a half of two lawyers going through all the cases and going through a lot of the minutia of the cases and kind of like the narratives that were told about these cases and how those don't match up a whole lot. Right. And that you need to really hold the people who accountable who are telling these people that there's this great outrage and the courts are being unfair and all of these fraud instances are being dismissed, and that wasn't the case at all. Like there was
election fraud is harder than people think. My sister is a solicitor in England, and that's not quite like a courtroom lawyer. Not like you guys would have in the States. Your idea of the barrister is your idea of the lawyer is a little bit different from ours. We have like two different classes of lawyer over here. But one of the things that she does is she works for like a local government council. Okay, so she does things like school intakes, family law, and things like that. But one of the things that was really interesting is she's because she works for the council. Every time elections come around, she is an election official. Okay, so and she said you should see how carefully we are observed and checked. How often we have to account for everything that we do. And like I heard someone say that in America there was a lot of feeling that like a postal vote could easily be faked or fraudulently mismanaged, and postal votes can be done at least on the scale we do them in the UK extremely safely. there's a lot of like checks and balances that they can put into that. And so I
Mhm.
was really surprised to hear that apparently, but again, I don't know how much of it is just the people who shout loud, rather than actually a large amount of Americans who had a problem. But
Mhm.
some people just going, oh, over here we have no confidence in the postal vote. If you're not there in person, you might as well not vote. And I was like, what? That just sounds crazy to me because, I mean, I voted by post for the last, I don't know, 10 years. And I have a lot of confidence in the system. So it was just really interesting to hear that different point of view and realize that some people just thought if I put it in the post, there's no guarantee I'm going to, that will be fraudulently mismanaged. And I just think it's harder to trick an election than people think.
Yeah, the big problem is it's over here. It's a narrative spun off of who. Okay, so the whole election fraud thing. It's it's really interesting here in the United States because the more restrictive voting laws are, it actually gives Republicans an advantage.
Okay.
So
Is that
whenever
because
they're
of the nature of Republican voters, or is that because why would tighter law governance give an advantage to Republicans? Is it because of the voting demographic?
yeah, it's mainly when it's harder to vote. Um, for some reason, I don't know what it is. Whether it has to do with social class or
Yeah,
anything of that nature. When it's harder to vote, this actually gives Republicans an advantage for some reason.
I wouldn't be
Whenever,
surprised if it is the demographic that maybe there's more younger and maybe slightly poorer people who vote who vote Democratic potentially.
yeah, so I don't know. This has been studied to death.
I'm sure it
So
has, way beyond anything that we're going to cover in the next 10 seconds.
yeah, it's been studied to death, and basically,
That's a provable fact, is it?
yeah. So one of the biggest reasons why the whole fraud rhetoric went up a notch this whole thing was one, we had the coronavirus, which actually enabled it actually made voting accessible to a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't be accessible for. So you got to remember,
Really?
in the United States, if you're not able to do a mail-in ballot, you would have to show up on the day to vote. And in our country, you do not get paid time off to do this. So if you're on the poor end of the spectrum, it's quite a,
It can be a challenge just to vote,
yeah, it could be a challenge.
and it might
So
be financially impactful.
that's right. So if you have a lot of poor people that live in cities and suburbs who
Mm,
don't have the ability to take off because they really need that paycheck to put food on the table,
agreed.
um, their only way to vote would be something easy like mailing in their ballot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
That's a huge reason to allow for mail-in ballots. Surely.
yeah, so there's that, and it's not like mail-in ballots have been a thing that the United States haven't been doing. Like all of our soldiers overseas do mail-in ballots. There are certain states that have been doing it for years. It's just the large influx of because of the pandemic, they
It
didn't
was
want.
basically loads of people did it this time.
Yeah, and there was an extremely ideological divide as well because when they were doing the election counts, a lot of the Republicans actually showed up at polling places to
Right?
vote, which I understand because, the sitting president was telling people that these were going to be like fraudulent, so make sure
Yeah.
you go vote in person.
So
And
they
then,
did. But that's
yeah,
obviously not helped because it goes against the advice that they were given to stop the spread of the virus.
yeah. So because the in-person votes are counted first and the mail-ins are counted last,
Right.
I remember on election night, it was like, wow, look at all these red states.
And then they turned blue.
Yeah, they turned blue overnight, which was like, oh, this is fraud. Look at all we were winning, and then look, you guys are now like Biden got all these votes like in the middle of the night. But The funny thing is, I knew all this was going to happen because I had seen so many political pundit types explain that this was going to happen.
Yeah,
But apparently, I
people still
guess,
didn't understand.
well, it's not that, it's just media silos. So people are contained within their own media silos, so they're not
Mm.
really getting all that information.
And
It's just crazy.
that's
It's just insane, man.
but we all. I don't mean to do that to myself, but you're like obviously Dusty. You've made a specific effort, like you say, woke centrist. You made a specific effort to reach outside of your echo chamber. But
Yeah.
even if you don't mean to, you can end up with one of those. I am. I come from a very specific religious background. I am like a middle class white male. I could not be more like standard English, center of the aisle, like everything is working for me, right? I've got all the right demographics to fit in. And when I look around, without meaning to,
Hmm.
most of my friends are middle-aged white males. They are like they're people quite like me. They all have jobs. Many of them are married or in heterosexual relationships. They we were people who have. Many of them are in my church. Um, like just the people I tend to hang around with, the people I tend to have friended on Facebook. A lot of them share a lot of my thoughts. And I guess that's natural to feel a kinship with people who agree with you and whose ideals match your own. But it is dangerous because
Hmm.
it makes you think that that's the only right point of view out there. And so that's why when someone on my Facebook or one of my social media feeds says something I don't like, I even if I don't comment, which I try not to, especially if I don't have anything good to say,
Hmm.
um, I think sometimes someone said to me like, "Why don't you just get rid of them? Like, just delete them off your feed." And I said, "No, I like the fact, even if it makes me uncomfortable, I think it's good that occasionally I am made uncomfortable because it makes me confront, like, challenge myself. Even if I end up deciding I'm right,
Hmm.
it's if your ideals cannot put up with opposition, then what are they? You know, if I'm like, I
Yeah.
believe in this, but the moment someone says the opposite, I crumble or I get angry, then did I really believe it in the first place? So I think it's good, but I've definitely found an echo chamber. Like I very rarely meet people who are in massive disagreement with me. I think it's one of the reasons Andrew's good for me because he has such different points of view on things. Like his way of life is very very different to mine, and
Yeah.
I would like actively disagree with his choice with many of his choices. But I love the guy as a person. I think he's brilliant. I love his intelligence. I love his wit, his humor, and actually I think he's a really nice person. He genuinely wants people to be kind to each other, and it's cool for me that I can interact with someone who has such a different point of view from me and genuinely enjoy having him as my friend. And so it's a good reason to do things like this because it pulls me out of my comfort zone, pulls me out of my echo chamber.
Yeah, I think it's really super important that you don't block people because of ideology. Like, if
Mm.
you're gonna block someone, do it because they're doing something truly,
Offensive,
uh,
bullying, abusive.
yeah, something that is meant to do you harm. If
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just an ideology, you can always talk through it.
yeah.
But yeah, it
I
defeats the
agree.
purpose. Like, if you're going to block someone, you're just creating another silo for yourself,
Indeed.
especially when it comes to ideology. So it's really difficult. I do know there are those people who, if they have the wrong opinions, they will block you for those wrong opinions. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I don't think that's really good for discourse or just getting along with people in general.
Agreed.
Um, yeah, it's just a management of emotion. Like sometimes I just gotta uh, just like breathe a little bit and think of kind of a response that seems super neutral, or instead of pursuing an I'm right, I'm wrong conversation, pursue a why do you think that way conversation,
Yeah.
and what got you to that point where you're thinking like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard, especially times like this where
People are
you
volatile.
hear really crazy stuff online and it just wants to make you shake your head into oblivion. And it's like, how does somebody who graduated from Harvard believe in this QAnon nonsense? Yeah, it happens.
One of the things that
Um,
helps me is I know that there's people who look at me and know that I believe in stuff that they think is nonsense. And I still want them to treat me nicely.
yeah,
And so,
that's true. Like I
because,
know
yeah,
that there's a lot of, I probably think some things that are nonsense as well.
or
Um,
that other people would consider nonsense.
yeah, but
Yeah.
there's a difference between, I guess, what does the nonsense, like what is the nonsense's impact on the world?
Yeah. And
Um,
on you as a person as well.
yeah, so yeah, like what is that nonsense driven? What has it done to your family? Because
Yeah.
sometimes it could be really hurtful, depending, if we're talking about like religious fervor,
Yeah.
there's,
Or
some
ideology.
cultish
Because for my,
religious ideology, because there's certain people that take it very, very far,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
become very, very strict,
Yeah.
very, very exclusive.
But some people
That's
who go the opposite way as well. I've seen someone whose ideology is there are no rules, right?
hmm
Like literally that any sort of strictness and discipline is not only like allowed, it like it's evil. And so
hmm
like you should see what her children behave like. And they are genuinely difficult to deal with in society because
yeah.
she has a policy in her home and with her family that no one is ever wrong and that
Mm.
everything is
That's
always
weird.
well, it is, but she's like her concept is that true love means that basically you accept someone no matter how they are. But it has led to an idea that law itself should not really exist, and that in our society I find is very difficult. And like my kids struggle with hers to an extent, as most people's kids, to be fair,
hmm
struggle with her children because her children are still part of school and church and civilization, but everyone else's kids, well, not everyone else's kids, but you know what I mean. The basic premise of the UK is that there are some rules that are optional and there's some that are not optional.
hmm
And so if you've been told at home and that your mum will come in and fight for you the right to do whatever you want and to not do whatever you don't want, and will fight that battle with till her dying breath, you start to think, oh, this is reality. And then at some point you're going to leave home and try and get a job and realize that your boss doesn't have that opinion, and then it's going to suck for you. And I find that like when you're saying it's like what are the consequences of these decisions? That's what I say. Like I say by their fruits you shall know them is like a thing I believe in. Like if you want to know what kind of tree I am, look at what I do, what comes out of me.
hmm
And like cause I had someone say to me, what if you're wrong, like about all these things that you think? I'm like, well, if I am, I still think I'll have lived a good life
hmm
because the things and I asked him, is there anything I'm doing that you think is harmful to anyone except maybe myself? And he said, no. Frankly, I think you're a good guy. And I said, well, so even if I'm deluded in my opinions and my ideology, you agree that the output is good. And he's like, I do. And I'm like, I can take
hmm
that. You can completely disagree with me, but thank you for saying that you think I'm a good human being. And that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I like my ideology because I think it's made me a better person. And then he's like, that I can grasp. And so I don't mind if someone thinks I'm a whack job, as long as they can talk to me with some kind of like reasonableness like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. Like I certainly get that, and I don't know. I just want people to get along, man. Like some of this national political stuff is just not that
Helpful.
important.
No.
And that's the problem is that these things are being driven. It's like since people are locked up, they have nothing better to do than groan
Yep,
about national politics on Facebook and
they're
Twitter.
bored.
Yeah.
They're
So
bored out of their minds.
I do think that, yes, being locked up is part of the problem. I think it is definitely causing people to go haywire with, and you know what? It's not only that, it's like all of the economic hardship that people
Yeah,
have,
and
that
that has absolutely
causes,
sucked. That has sucked. It's caused so much trouble. So many people. That has been. You're right, Dusty. That is like something that has just caused so much trouble. And there's a lot of people in, like, people will criticize anything, right? No
mm,
matter what you do. If you're really strict with the rules, there's people who will rip you for that. If you're too lax, there's people who will rip you for that. So
mm,
as the political leader, you cannot actually win, even if you're awesome. And to
yeah,
be fair, most of them aren't like awesome.
mm,
They're okay. And like in England, it's no different. There's a lot of criticism, pretty much no matter what happens.
mm.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, let's do
So,
this.
so I think
Are we
we
good to go?
yeah, we exhausted our political rants here. So I
Well,
went
we were
ahead and,
ranting.
yeah, I went ahead. Well, yeah, we were both. Well, we're not ranting. We're not
No,
like
definitely not.
having
We're
some type
commenting.
of diatribe or anything. We're just kind of analyzing the
Yeah.
zeitgeist of what's going on and how people are at wits' end.
Yeah, it was helpful for me. You give definitely an interesting perspective, Dusty. So, um, kick us off.
All right, so finally we're getting back to the Wheel of Time after
Yeah.
some time. Uh, so we're on part two of the Crown of Swords. That's going to be chapters 16 to 30. So we are going to discuss the chapters here and hope you have a fun ride. I know we went into politics quite a bit, but that's fine. I'll probably
We'll edit
edit it
most of
out
that
later.
out. We can
Yeah.
we can just start with the Wheel of Time stuff.
Yeah, I'll edit that out later. So let's go ahead and touch down on things. So, chapter 16. This is immediately after the whole Dark Friend meeting at
Yeah.
Carradine's place. So this is going to be a point of view of Matt.
Hmm.
He is concerned. He wants to get a hold of the Supergirls, Elaine and
Hmm.
Nynaeve and Ebudar at the moment. So he goes looking for them. He goes to Terrasin Palace, which is
Hmm.
the palace over in Ebudar. And when he's looking for them, he encounters a group of Aes Sedai.
Yeah. And like all Aes Sedai, they're like, ooh, shiny. We want him.
Yeah, so they're kind of playing a little bit of tug of war. So the interesting thing about this group of Aes Sedai is that there's some from the tower and there are some of the rebels.
Mm,
So we got Teslin, who's a rebel. No, Teslin's a tower Aes Sedai, right? And Jolene.
yeah.
And then Adelius is one of the rebels. I know
Yeah.
Saritha and Merlilla are also there as well.
Yeah.
So they're talking with Matt. They're kind of probing his mind a bit. And Matt just wants to find the girl. So that's kind of questions he's asking them. And they're just like super interested in his Devirness. And of course, Teslin and Jolene, really, they're probably more interested in trying to get them back into the tower.
Yeah. But yeah, because they're actually interested in the Supergirls as well, not just Matt. They're like,
Oh, yeah.
because they want to get them, as you say, back to the tower, hopefully because they're very, very powerful, in their eyes, accepted, right? So very valuable. And
Well,
specifically, Elaine is a political piece as well.
yeah, they're valuable, but at the same time, they're also resented, right?
Yeah.
Because they didn't get to their station in quite the same way that everybody else did.
Agreed. Agreed. Well, they wouldn't accept that they're in that station. They still consider them runaway accepted.
Oh, yeah, and they treat them that way as well. Even some of the Aes Sedai among the rebels still treat them as accepted. And
Yeah, but,
we do see that later in the book. I know Elaine puts her foot down.
but it's hard. It's hard when you've had a century of a certain kind of cultural significance to suddenly have someone say, "Yeah, all of you had to do this. We don't have to anymore."
Mhm.
Imagine if suddenly you got like a new educational secretary in the States and they suddenly said, right, you no longer need to go through university to get a university degree. I'm just going to give it to these people because I feel like it. Like,
Mhm.
hey, that's not a real degree. Like, I say it is. Like,
Well, in the States, they call those honorary degrees.
yeah,
And
like,
most people just treat those as, that's just a degree in name.
yeah, it's to say we like you. And I guess that's what some of the Aes Sedai, who even though they're rebel Aes Sedai, think of what Egwene has done is like, yeah, you're Aes Sedai in name only. You're honorary Aes Sedai because we
Mhm.
have to at least kind of pretend that we accept our new Emerald seat.
So, eventually, Matt does get rescued from these Aes Sedai by one of Queen Tyland's servants.
Yeah, yeah, and goes over to
Uh,
her.
yeah, so he's summoned by the Queen. They have a conversation.
Hmm.
So it seems that Thailand, well, Matt believes that Thailand is interested in him because of his Tavernness.
Yeah. But she gives him she touches him, doesn't she? Like, and so it's a hint to the reader that, like, oh, she's interested.
Yeah. So during this conversation, he informs Thailand about Carradine and that he has been hosting dark friends. And she takes it as in whatever, and then she changes the subject. So he's
Yeah.
kind of miffed about that.
Yeah, I think she should be like trying to sort it out.
Yeah, at least doing something about it.
But we find that she is quite laissez-faire. Like she does lead her people, but it like she is, as we're going to see later on, when other bad things happen to Ebudar, that she is someone who's she's not like an absolute monarch in the way that the some of the other kings and queens are, like in
Hmm.
Tyr. Stuff. We'll see.
So eventually, Beslan, who is Thailand's,
That's her son, right?
yeah, it's Thailand's son,
I
and
love him.
he comes in bragging about a duel where he just killed somebody quite casually.
Didn't he like say like because like when this the thing I love about what Jordan does here as a writer is he establishes, and he does this brilliantly in my opinion. Before I read Wheel of Time, I read other fantasy series where there were lots of other races, and often those races were very one note. Dwarves are gruff and loyal, elves are artful and artistic and otherworldly and good. And one of the things that I was a bit worried about with Wheel of Time when I first got into it is I'm like, oh, everyone's human. This is going to be a bit boring. Give me more Augier or something. But then I realized that what Jordan has done is he's taken humanity and really broken it down, and different cultures are done so well that they are as interesting to discover as different races. And like what he shows us here about the Ebudari, he doesn't say, by the way, in Ebudar, dueling is a way of life, that it's
Hmm.
like totally normal. He just has someone come in and talk about dueling as if it's just like, yeah, I met with my friends in the park. And then he's like, like we went to play football, and unfortunately, like I kicked John, and I think he twisted his ankle. And that's how he talks about killing this man. He's like, oh, we got into this duel, and I didn't mean to, but I kind of overdid it, and he's dead. Didn't really mean to. That kind of
Yeah.
sucks. Like it's in that same sort of casualness of this. I threw in a tackle that was a bit too hard. Whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty much shown as Ebudar is an extreme honor culture who settle, slights with duels to the death.
Well, they
Um,
can be that they don't have to be. Like that's why he hadn't intended to kill the man. Like you can duel to injury, and later on we see some duels that are only to injury. But he obviously went a little bit further than he originally intended.
yeah, he went a little too hard, and the guy ended up dying.
And that's clearly something that happens frequently.
Yeah, in Abadar. And we could see that based off of the ornamentation on Teslin's marriage knife,
Dagger. Yeah.
which shows, like, they have ornamentation on these knives, which kind of tells you, oh, this daughter or son died in a duel.
Yeah.
So
Different colors
these
if they're
are,
alive, different colors if they're dead, different colors if they're married, and different colors if they're dead from a duel rather than dead for other reasons.
yeah, so it's almost like dying from a duel is actually honorable in this
Yeah.
society.
Praised.
Yeah, so she kind of pushes Veslin to be friends with Matt.
Yeah.
And they do become friends.
Yeah, yeah,
So
genuinely.
yeah, they genuinely like each other.
They're
Uh,
both they're both a little what you call it? Not unhinged, wrong word. They're both a little lawless, you know.
yeah, they're
Uh,
lawless. They're
and
philanderers. They kind of,
free
um,
thinkers.
yeah,
Free,
they kind of fit together like a glove,
yeah.
pretty much.
He's not Perrin, let's put it that way.
Yeah. So next we got the next chapter, the Triumph
Yeah.
of Logic, which is Matt again.
Yep.
So he returns to the inn that
Yeah.
he is at with select members of the band.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
don't
he
think there's
felt
much here. Apart from it, doesn't he get attacked?
he's about to.
Okay, go on.
So he goes back to the inn, and he arranges a Vannon, the horse thief,
I
and
love Bannon.
he's just yeah, he's just. It's funny because he doesn't talk a whole lot, but he's like, I remember there's this one scene where everyone is like comes to alert when Matt walks in, and then Vannon's just kind of lying in bed, like twiddling his thumbs.
I just love the fact that he's like the best rider in the entire series, and he's fat as anything. I think
Yeah,
that's
he's like
hilarious.
he's like a fat dude, but he's not as only as he's the best rider, he's like the sneakiest thief ever.
When it comes to
Nobody ever
horses, he
sees
can
the
literally
guy.
just steal it from right under you.
Yeah, so he is he went back and he instructed them to go ahead and start watching Carradine
Yeah.
to see what he's up to monitor his activities. And on his way up to his room, he gets attacked by two men that were sent to abduct him. So I know he kills one off the bat pretty quickly, and then he kind of spooks the other one and kills him as well.
Right.
And I think what's her name runs up, the lady who owns the place. She runs up and she's kind of nonchalant about the dead people there, like it's an occurrence that happens all the time. I guess that's kind of how this town is.
It's
People just end up
Ebudar.
dead.
But again, that's what I was saying before about Jordan. And anyone who wants to write like him should notice how much of it is just show not tell. You know, she doesn't need to mention people all the time. It's just the way she reacts shows that that's the situation, and that's just cracking great writing.
Yeah, so she shows up and comments on the whole situation. And Matt finds a note in his pocket
I'd forgotten this.
that suggests that Nynaeve and Elaine need to be more careful. And I forgot about this note.
Yeah,
And
me too.
then I was like, okay, I know who put that there.
One of the Aes Sedai.
No, it would have been Mistress Anon who would have put that there.
Ah,
Because Mistress Anon knows that Nynaeve and Elaine know Matt, and they've hung around with Matt. And she is the one that kind of drags them to the kin and tells them, oh, you guys got to be careful. You
right.
guys are masquerading as Aes Sedai. So I think it was Anon, Mistress Anon, that actually wrote the note.
Oh, good call. Good call.
It's never said explicitly, but that's who I think did it.
No, I'm with you, man. I can't really remember it, but that makes sense.
So, yeah, the note just says to avoid Jolin and Teslin and And well, actually, Matt believes Jolene or Tesla were one of the ones who had slipped the note.
Yeah, but
I,
if he believes it, it's almost certainly not true because it's Matt.
it's not true because Jolene and Tesla would not want to give Nynaeve and Elaine a warning at all. They would do just the opposite. So, despite the attempt, these dice are still rolling in Matt's head, and these dice have started rolling. I think it was a couple chapters back
Hmm.
before he met the Queen. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, next we get a little point of view of one of the Black
Ace
Aja,
Yeah.
and she's torturing one of the wise women. So the wise women are basically like the yellows of the kin, if I'm not
Well,
mistaken.
no, hang on. Isn't it a wise one? Oh no, the wise women of Ebudar. Yeah, so they're like herbalists, and so some of them have um, healing ability, and some of them are uh, actually somewhat using potentially they're actually using the power if they're in the kin, but
Yeah,
not all of them are members of the kin. Some of them are just literally like like wise
wisdoms.
like wisdoms. Yeah, exactly. And but in Ebudar you wear a red belt if you're a wise woman, and it means that like you're basically you're accepted as a professional healer,
Mhm.
but not like with the power, with just skills. However, many of them are hiding and are actually the kin. So
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
gotta assume that if this Black Aja member is torturing one of these wise women,
yeah,
I believe this Black Aja person probably had seen this wise woman channel.
yeah. I would imagine so. And if she's trying to find this, is it the stash?
Yeah, they're looking for the Tirangriel stash.
Yeah,
So
and
that's
she,
what they're torturing her for, to
yeah.
find out information about it. But it
But
goes too far, and she's accidentally killed during the interrogation.
and one of the things I want to draw attention to here is I believe because I think that this is a deliberate parallel between what we had in the chapter before with Beslin.
Hmm.
Beslin's playing sports, dueling, and accidentally killing people for which he feels regretful. This chapter is called The Triumph of Logic, and Falion is white Aja. Well, she's black, really. But one of the things is that she sees following the Dark One as a logical step, that it just makes sense to follow the Dark One because in the end he will eventually win. And also she believes that even though they've been given a command, I think by Monkedian, I don't know, it might have been Bilal, but one of the Forsaken has told them to get the stash, and she's like, but we're not finding it. But Monkedian hates Nynaeve, so it's Monkedian at this point. So why
Hmm.
don't we get her instead? And to her, everything is logical. She hasn't followed the Dark One for passion, and then she turns around and realizes she's utterly killed this man and feels nothing. Like, not even the slightest remorse. She's like, ah, oh, dang it. If I tortured him a bit more carefully, I could have kept her alive. But she's not bothered that she's killed her. She's bothered that maybe I could have got more information out of her. That was a bit
Hmm.
sloppy. And this is so interesting because Beslan is the exact opposite of logic. Like, he makes all his decisions with his heart, and she makes all her decisions with her head. And neither
Hmm.
of those is wrong, but it shows that either taken to extremes can lead to death.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, you basically explained everything what's going on here. So,
Yeah.
in the end, she does believe that the whole Turangirl stash thing is a red herring, and does decide that pursuing Nynaeve for Gideon would be more beneficial. Also to note, they do have a little bit of a discussion because Ispen is still there, which is another one of the black,
Mm,
and they have a discussion because one is doubting that Mogideon is even around or even alive. One of
mm,
them has faith to stay on the path, and the other is like, we haven't heard from Mogideon in forever. Like, what are we still
No,
doing?
he's hiding. She's hiding. She is the spider.
Well, yeah, because they don't know what happened at all.
No,
She
she got
got
captured.
taken. Yeah, she got captured, and then she got uh, put through some other things, which we're gonna learn about shortly. Um, oh yeah, so last point of view of this book is Noel, who becomes a pretty integral figure later
But
on.
at this point, he's just an old guy.
Yeah, he's just an old guy, and he's watching the house where the two Aes Sedai are staying.
Mm.
And well, I forgot to tell you, like there's two underlings that they've hired to dispose of the body.
Yeah,
So he's
it's
watching
not
this
important.
house.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's just watching the house, and he sees that these two dudes are transporting a body outside. But yeah, it's kind of a setup for this character who becomes more instrumental in later books.
agreed.
So the next chapter, uh, what is it called? It's called The Plow as the Plow Breaks the Earth.
Okay.
And we're going back to Rand here.
Yeah, he's the plow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So Rand, yeah, Rand is going pretty hard now.
yeah,
He's
because
starting to become hard and
yeah,
and gut level, like the kind of
this
I
is
don't know. He
post
just
box.
does.
That's what it
Yeah, this
is.
is post box. He's gone through some trauma. So he's been acting out in some respects, but there's certainly people see that something's going on.
Yeah, the way he treats the Aes Sedai in particular, the ones who swore to him, is quite. He just it's like everyone, like all even the people who hate Aes Sedai, like don't treat them as like nothing. They treat them as like evil or good or honor, but like they're never treated as menial. And he's treating them as like mean. You've
Yeah,
sworn to me, you will do what you're told, and that is like it shocks people.
yeah. One of the things he's doing too is he's trying to defeat a rumor, specifically in the
Oh,
beginning of this chapter. So there's a rumor that he became the Aes Sedai puppet. Like he's a puppet of the Aes Sedai, and
yeah,
he's trying his hardest right now, even being, not so nice about it to show that he is not their puppet. Because this was a thing that was going around in the Aiel camps, which was actually causing some to defect to the Shido. So he's trying to squash this rumor by being really hard about how to handle
the Aes
um,
Sedai.
the Aes Sedai.
Agreed.
So now that he's trying to do this, um, Rand has a conversation with Barrelane. I was like, man, why would he do this? But
He's just
because
trying to
she
send her
gets,
back to Maine, isn't he? Isn't this where he
yeah,
tries to send her back to Maine?
yeah, and this is like where I'm really liking Barrelane,
Yeah,
despite her meddling with Perrin and his relationship.
yeah.
Um,
But the thing is that, like, I think in Rand is like, I genuinely think that she could be useful in Maine, but she could also be useful here. But I think that Rand's decision here is not logical. I think his decision here is Berylane almost got killed in the coup when he was gone in the box, and they took over Kerheim behind his back, and he left her in charge. And she was almost like he was genuinely worried she'd die, and he doesn't want her on his list of
that's
women.
true. That
And
is true.
he doesn't think about women in an egalitarian way. I
Hmm.
don't think Rand is a misogynist, but he sees women as people who should be protected and not in war and not killed. And I think some of that is Luce Theron, from losing his wife, from killing his own wife. And I think that's what provokes this decision.
Well, I do get it too because it genuinely damages Rand's psyche when he sees women killed or
It
women
does.
who are associated with them killed. Like,
Agreed.
it is not something that he can simply easily go over because of misogyny. It psychically hurts him when he sees these things. Like when he sees the men get killed, he gets over it.
Yeah,
But
he
when he
does.
sees the women get killed, these things just break him down, and he's constantly thinking and worrying about it.
He just cares more about it, and
Hmm.
and he just thinks that, in some ways that maybe he should have just stopped any woman that is under his protection from being harmed. And obviously he can't. This is the will of time. This is the time when the Dark One is touching the world. You just can't keep an entire half of the human race safe. You just can't do it. And the way he bears that burden, and it just weighs him down. And I think that's part of what is leading to him becoming hardened and broken. Definitely, like psychologically broken.
Mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's trying to convince Berlin to leave. Berlin doesn't want to. She is, I know, she's very loyal to Rand at this point, and
Mm.
doesn't want to be sent away because she thinks that she won't be able to defend Mayenne and be a part of like the political
Mm.
side of things if she's far away. Um, like she won't be able to. If there are plots against Mayenne, she won't be there on the front lines defending Mayenne in that respect and being a diplomat like she is. So, um, yeah, so they tussle over that a little bit. Eventually, she does consider it,
Mm.
but it's not set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
But he does, while they're having this conversation, Cad Swain shows up.
Uh, uh, she is an amazing but frustrating character.
Yeah, well, Cad Swain's revered and feared
For good
by
reason.
by many of her Aes Sedai colleagues. Like
Yep.
every single Aes Sedai that she's in a room with will pay deference to her.
Yeah.
We do see that throughout this book.
Yeah.
And she kind of just strolls in there without respect or regard for Rand.
Yeah.
And he finds this extremely infuriating
Yeah.
because she doesn't know the well, maybe she does know the circumstances and is not letting on, and she's just trying to push his buttons.
And he just
But
when he's trying to get rid of that rumor, right, that you mentioned at the beginning.
yeah, and this is not helping him at the moment. So, yeah, they have a conversation that's quite well. Rand is heated. Cad Swain is pretty nonchalant about it. But yeah, they have a conversation. It gets heated, and I believe he's in the middle of having an audience. So she kind of just walks in the room and takes charge or attempts to take charge of what's going on. And she makes a very important statement and asks Rand if he's starting to hear voices.
Yeah, which throws him off his game.
Yeah, because it's true.
Yeah.
Um,
But she's dealt with one of the things that we I don't know if we already know this, but if we don't, we find out pretty soon that she's dealt with several men who can channel. Even though she's not a red, she has like experience at taking down men who can channel.
yeah,
And
she
so
does
like
talk
she's
about
seen them
that.
go insane before.
Mm,
Which is unsettling, right? If you're a man who can channel.
hmm So at the end of the scene, Adrian shows up, and Adrian is someone that's from Rand's, what do you want to call it, the farm,
The school,
the school.
isn't it like the university where
Yeah, it's kind of like where he gets all the bright minds together and they're working
yeah.
on their little projects.
And we touched on it briefly before because there was that guy who lived there, the philosopher dude's there, and Min likes the school as well.
Hmm.
Like she's often talking. I've forgotten his name. Oh, no, I want to. I wanted to say Pedroniel or Padanfanes. It must be a P. But anyway, I can't think of it, so carry on.
Oh yeah, so she delivers some bad news, and
Yep.
it's bad. So what's his name? So
Is it
many
that he's dead?
characters. Yeah, that he got turned into like a meat pile, basically.
Yeah. It is that
Uh,
guy, isn't it? The philosopher guy. Herod fell. Herod fell. Yeah? Ah, dang it. We lost him. So, looks like we lost Dusty there. He will, I'm sure, be back. Hey, Dusty, you back? So anyway, yeah, Herod Fell, for those of you who don't know, was a like a philosopher who was in the school, and one of the important things is that he discovers something crucial that we're not told what it is in the book, but we know that just when he discovers it, that and he says he needs to tell Rand, he never gets to, and then he is destroyed, like not just killed, but like destroyed, brutally killed, and later we find out it was by the golem, ripped apart limb from limb by the shadow. And so one of the things that he seems to say, the only thing we got from that was the sentence "clearing away the rubble." So anyway, so that's just something for us to consider about why the shadow would have killed him, and why you need to clear away the rubble before you can rebuild.
yeah. So yeah, next chapter we got Diamonds and Stars,
Okay.
which is a point of view of a couple different characters. We have a point of view of Marana, and she. It's not a whole big deal, but it's her view of Cad Swain. So it's basically filling in some more of like Cad Swain's personality from a different point of view. And she gets interrogated by Cad Swain, and
Yeah.
there's a couple other Aes Sedai there as well. And it's just showing that like she's really nervous and talking to her because of like the deference that they get. So they basically fill her in about Rand, Demise
Yeah.
Wells, and
It's just to make sure that the reader knows that Katsue now understands everything, and that like it's also to establish how we as the reader should see her, that she's big news. That's I
mhm.
think basically the only point of that part of the chapter.
Yeah. So yeah, they fill her in, and we get a little bit of character development. And then we get another point of view from Min, and Min is basically informing Rand that Colivir committed suicide.
Yeah, which she's not gonna like.
Well, Rand isn't going to like. It's really interesting because the interesting is that the tone of kind of that I would say the foreshadowing was kind of told by what's that Carrie dude's name? Um, the guy who's like one of the commanders of like the Carrie side of the army. Doughboy, Doughbrain.
Dobrain, yeah. Dobrain.
Yeah, he kind of mentioned to Rand that exile it was going to be exile would be worse than killing, than executing her, because execution would actually have been an honorable death. So as he actually, well, I wouldn't say that he foreshadowed it, but we could see in their society that death would have been preferable to being exiled, and that's kind of what Colivir does. Is she takes herself out.
Yeah,
Uh
because
oh.
she can't bear it. But obviously Rand tried to do it to avoid executing her, and basically now he adds her name to the list. Even though he didn't kill her and she's killed herself, her name goes on the list. Even though she betrayed him, even though she usurped him, even though she arranged for him to be put in the box. Well, not
Mm,
deliberately put in the box, but her actions led to that. He still adds her to the list of women
yeah.
he has failed, which is just crazy to me, but it just shows that it's not a logical thing. it's an emotional thing.
Yeah, so when also Minute notices when she enters that there's like broken mirrors and stuff toppled over, and this is before Min gets there. So he had been raging about something, and then Rand tells Min about Herod fell, and that likely that he was killed by
Yeah,
Shadow Spawn because of how gruesome it was.
yeah. 'Cause like you said, he isn't just killed; he's like destroyed, like torn
Yeah,
apart. He's a pile of meat. But one of the things I think is pretty interesting, just and I mentioned it just while you were off the call for a second, is that
mm,
Herod Fell. We don't get much of him, but he's meant to be this very, very intelligent man, a little bit distracted, and like a philosopher, and someone who thinks about the deep questions. So he doesn't think, how can I beat the Shido or something like that? But what he's been considering is, how do we beat the Dark One, right?
mhm,
And
yeah.
we get very, very little, but one of the things we do get is this comment, clear away the rubble. And we know he wanted to talk to Rand about something that he thought was exciting, but he never got to say it. And so
Mhm.
all we have is that kind of like little cryptic point, clear away the rubble. And obviously, for a long time after that, we theorized that that was destroying potentially the old seals.
Okay. I didn't know you were trying to join for a while, Andrew. I guess I
Oh,
didn't get the notification. How long were you trying to join for?
oh, just like a minute or two ago.
I didn't even hear any notification about it. I was like, huh, what's this thing?
Welcome to the
Oh.
party.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, we were just talking about Herod Phil and, theories about why he was killed. Andrew's like thinking, who the hell is Herod Phil?
Yeah, that's one of the like 300 characters who I don't
Yeah.
remember.
He was the headmaster of Rand's school that he kind of set up.
Oh, okay.
Not the Ashaman. I'm talking about like when they're discovering all these
Like it's
little
an
things.
actual school. Like it's a like they try and come up with like the very first kind of car slash train, like a wagon that moves, and like crossbows and that kind of thing.
Okay.
Right.
So immediately after he tells her they get it on for the first time.
Oh yeah.
So I'm talking about Min and Rand. So
And typical Jordan cut to black.
Yep.
yeah,
We're keeping it PG-13 here, folks.
Yeah, but he makes it very clear that they're gonna have sex, like because they start kissing passionately and then they're ripping each other's clothes off, and then he says, "Right, I'll switch characters." So he just makes
Yeah.
sure that it cannot be misunderstood.
yeah, and the funny and
This is
sad.
the part where he's like dismissing her and he's like, you're not very womanly, and she like jumps onto his lap. Oh, you mean these like manly boobs and this manly butt of mine and that kind of stuff?
The thing is that Min, in many ways, like she's the one who wears like the trousers and jackets and stuff, and in ways departs from girl fashion of Randland, but she is definitely the most openly sexual. Like of all of his, like you'd think it'd be Avienda because of like the Aiel like have this whatever nudity thing, but like Avienda's actually takes like the sex very seriously and is like embarrassed when she does it and feels like she might have to like turn herself over to Elaine possibly for execution. Whereas Min just like, man, I'm sexy, you're sexy, let's freaking do this.
So it makes you think though, what if Avienda didn't have the obstacle of having toe towards Elaine
Yeah,
for
they
that,
could
like
have.
because I think a lot of her anger issues were part of that
Guilt.
promise that she made. So
Mhm.
I'm wondering how she would have handled her relationship to Rand if Elaine was never in the picture. I think it would have been much, much more different.
Yeah,
Yeah, I bet
but
it would.
the Aiel just have a different way of looking at things, though, don't they? And like, even though they are like totally not bothered about nudity, they are quite bothered about marriage,
Mm.
which is interesting because
Mhm.
we often in our culture those sort of ideas of modesty and like the sort of older cultural ideals of things like marriage kind of go together a little bit in our head because both in the Jewish, Muslim, Christian traditions, modesty was a big deal, especially for women. It wasn't exactly equal, but in I think in Randland, another bit of brilliant world building by Jordan is he's like, no, I'm going to do it differently. They like don't give a shoot about modesty, but they really care about specific relationships, and actually they don't care about monogamy either. But oaths, commitment, and keeping to those commitments, they're a massive deal. And like it's hard for us because we're trained to think of things like polygamy as just wrong, right? I mean that's just illegal. So like our culture rejects it. However, it's not beyond the scope to imagine a culture like Thail that would accept it. But it's so cool that he's like given this culture that take oaths so seriously, but has take modesty. It's nothing. That's wetlander crap.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. That's true.
But that's what you should do, right? If you're writing a book, you should play.
Yeah, that's one of the great aspects that I think Robert Jordan exceeds at is creating all these intricate cultures with their different social customs and different forms of clothing and cultural practices and all of those aspects.
I totally agree. So yeah, Nin and Rand, sex on. Avienda and Rand, sex previously in Igloo. So now it's just Elaine who's still sitting on the big virgin duck.
Yeah. I don't remember when they first have sex.
Well, basically, it's when the three of them get together and they're like, "We both had something from you, and Elaine hasn't, so off you go." And it's like it's one of those bits where it's like, "Yeah, there's three of us and there's one of you, but we're going to be in charge." And it's like, so you're saying I have to have sex with three gorgeous women who all love me? I guess okay.
I guess I'll do it. Okay.
I'll fall on my sword for the sake of the game. No. But it is. It's like it's really weird, but it's cool because it's different. Like we've seen traditional romances many times. I know some people have a real problem with the fact that the hero of the book is in a polygamous relationship, and they're like, "Oh, it's just some old guy's wet dream or whatever." But the point is, it is useful to explore something different. So this is like a love triangle or a love quadrangle that doesn't need to be resolved, right? Because
it's not like they have representation that there's no representations of monogamous relationships. But we all see that there's turmoil between both these polygamous relationships and turmoil within some of the monogamous relationships.
Which is great because it means it's not like a cardboard cutout. Like Worf is all Klingons, or Spock is all Vulcans. All right, it's like no, there's more to this culture, more to this idea than just one example, which I think is great.
For sure.
Anyway, so after that, I think is when, and again, I promise not to go off on like theory crafting, but then Kadsoon like gets the closing remarks. And basically, one of the only interesting things is she mentions the last time I made a serious mistake was 270 years ago. And the thing I love about this is just like, how arrogant do you have to be to think that? Because she's not saying that to other people. That's what she thinks to herself. So she genuinely believes that she has not made a serious mistake in over 2 centuries. I mean, that woman is seriously arrogant. I'm just going to put it right there. Like, Rick, how arrogant do you have to be to think you haven't made a serious mistake in over 2 freaking centuries? But that does show what she's like. She really does think that she is the best thing. For everybody. Sure. For Rand, for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Kadsoon. I have a hard time with that girl. Great character, but my goodness, I would want to shoot her. Like, with guns. Lots of guns.
Yeah, Robert Jordan's good at writing characters who you hate.
But the thing is, I understand that people like her are needed. I just wouldn't want to know them. You know,
Yeah.
I'm glad that I'm too unimportant to know people like that. Thank goodness, they would drive me to distraction. Um,
Yeah.
so then we go on to just while waiting for Dusty, we go on to patterns within patterns. So that is the next chapter. So chapter 20. And this is where it switches to Savannah. Now, Savannah's running the Shido. She's basically murdered her way to the top.
Yep.
Oh, you're back. So what do you think of Savannah and what she's doing with Kadar?
Well, yes, we know Kadar is Samael in disguise,
Mm-hmm.
and Kadar is trying to manipulate the Shido right now, and he is deceiving them by offering them this
Travel boxes.
toolbox, travel boxes. But
He's called them fool boxes in the old tongue. So they're calling them fool boxes and they don't even know. This is
yeah,
such a dark move.
so she
I
doesn't
totally
really
forgot.
know the true extent of who Kadar is, and assumes that he is empowered because he has Aes Sedai with him,
Yeah,
who is just another Forsaken. But he's
yeah,
using the Mask of Mirrors
yeah,
when he meets with them, and they first contact him through the box, and then
yeah.
he shows up, and they're kind of
And
baffled about that.
and they think that it's Grendel who's doing it. Like because
Yeah.
Grendel's with him, so they assume that all the channeling is her. They don't think it's him. They think she's kind of doing the powers, and they don't realize.
I
Mm,
totally forgot this part.
Yeah, it's all
yeah.
subterfuge and misdirection. But remember, Crown of Swords, really, Samael is the bad guy of this book.
Mm. Yeah, this is Samael's book. But yeah, he meets with them, and he they're kind of offended by him. I know Savannah is, and she's like, "How dare this like wetlander?" Like that's her thought process.
And he's
When
so much more important and powerful than she is. She's just like, she can't use the power. She's got to where she is by lying, cheating, and sleeping with people. It's like, how do you think that you're important, woman? My goodness. Like, I said I had trouble with Cat swaying, but my goodness, Savannah just needs to have like someone slap her twice and then kill her, which luckily eventually happens.
She's like the most popular kid in school.
Yeah, like pretty but hollow.
Yeah. It's
Ah,
like,
hate
oh,
her,
have you
hate
seen
her.
her? She's so hot. Yeah, but have you dated her though? Does she have a personality? No, but look how hot she is.
Oh, that is not a quality on its own. But anyway, Savannah.
yeah, so eventually we do see that Kadar was offering something to Savannah,
Mm,
which was contingent upon her capturing Rand, and of course she had failed doing this at the Demise Wells. And the funny
yeah,
thing is, now that I think about it, that there were two Forsaken working against each other there.
yeah.
So
That's not
we had
unusual.
that's not unusual. So
Yeah.
Demandred wanted to cause chaos and to break Rand's mind, and Samael wanted to capture Rand and use the what was he going to use against Rand? He did he have another pair of the sad
No,
bracelets or something?
no, but I think it's implied that he intended to use a kind of compulsion.
A
But
compulsion.
whether or not that would have been possible with an unbroken rand is unsure because compulsion is hard to use on people who have the power. So it would have been a risky play. But the
Mhm.
idea is there's this point of if we can kill Rand, all well and good, but turning him is far more useful because
Mhm.
he's the Fisher King, and where he
Right.
goes, so goes the land. And Moradin, as you know, changes them from kill Rand to a do not kill Rand under any circumstances. Yeah,
That's
Mhm.
and
right.
and so they're kind of struggling with the Moradin line, and Demandred is specifically anti-Moradin because he wants to be well, they all want to be nameless,
Mhm.
Mhm.
and Samael actually claims he's been named nameless, but so do a few people claim they've been named nameless. But one of the things that's really cool here is for me is that Moradin's actually watching them. So you can see that he doesn't really believe this like claim of Samael's, and he is like just like Samael thinks he's a big deal. Moradin realizes, or I think we're supposed to get from this, Moradin is a bigger deal. He's playing the bigger game, and one of the cool things is that we see here a demonstration of the true power. For the first time, is it the first time? It's one of the few times we see the true power used before Endgame.
Yeah, so I know he does have a gadget with him called a fan cloth.
Well, fan cloth is just warder cloaks.
Yeah, so he's rendered basically invisible.
Yeah.
So he's using this to cover himself up so he can't be seen while he's observing Samael and Grandal.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do. He gets overheard, and what he hears is that Samael claimed that he has come up with a truce with Rand, but we all know this is BS.
Because Moradin knows it's BS.
Yeah, he does as well. And what was the other thing that he talks about? I know that Samael was considering killing Savannah.
Oh, and he should have.
Yeah.
I would have loved you so much more, Samael. You should have done it. Kill them all. I hate the Shido storylines. I hate them. Just kill them all. Anyway.
Okay.
Engage with
a nice guy. Even though I like the nice people, just kill them as well. Just anything to get rid of Savannah. I think she might have been my most hated character in the whole series. Just what a waste of space. Anyway, sorry. Sidetrack.
So Moradin discards the idea, and then we do see him use the true power to open some type of gateway.
The key thing is that the true power is like, because we've been told the one power is everything, right? The one power is like male and female. It's both sides. It's yin and yang. It's the pattern. It's the pattern. It's the dream world. It's everything. But he steps with the true power. The gateway that he uses isn't through the pattern. It's outside the pattern. Now that means he is outside, if you like, of reality. And remember, that's what the Dark One wants to do. It wants to destroy reality itself. Not just win a battle, stop the wheel turning, kill the serpent. And so that's when we start realizing that the true power is coming from somewhere beyond life, beyond reality, beyond matter, maybe even.
Right. Maybe it's quantum equations, maybe it's something that crazy.
And then we also realize that there's a cost because we see the saw in his eyes. So he's slowly being destroyed by this power. Even if you do it with the Dark One's permission, you're still gonna die. And
die or driven mad. Because this is kind of like what would have happened to Samael when he first started using the power. And then we got to see the end result, which is a flame within, right? Like his eyes are always glowing. Whenever he opens his mouth, there's just like fire or whatever. So this is kind of the early stages of that. I guess the more you use it, the more like mad you get. But it typically shows that whoever is using this ends up being the de facto kind of head.
Because you can only use it with the Dark One's permission. You don't get born with the ability to use the true power. The Dark One basically untaps it for you, and then you can access it. So the fact he can access it is proving that the Dark One has chosen him. Yeah. And it's another comment against addiction, which Jordan does a lot of. He's clearly not a fan.
Yeah, and all of the powers have addictions, but this one seems to be the most addictive power.
Yep. It's just he comments on that frequently in a few different ways.
So next chapter, it's going to be Swoven Night.
I don't remember why it's called that, but okay.
It's like a celebration, I
Right. And
believe,
in
like a
Ecuador.
holiday. Yeah.
Right.
So
It's a
Matt's walking.
celebration, bitches.
Say that
What do
again,
you?
Andrew. What did
That's
you
a
say?
celebration, bitches.
So okay, so Matt immediately gets attacked by a bunch of bums in the street,
Of course.
and he believes it's a bunch of beggars trying to rob him.
Okay.
But it's just another attempt to abduct him. So after he gets through that, because I know Beslin was there, like everyone was there,
Mhm.
and he fights off some of the beggars at Beslin, and then they kind of remark about it. It's like, oh, were they mad because you did something or said something to the Beggars Guild? And then Matt's like, Beggars Guild? What the hell is that? It's like everything has to have a guild in Abu Dhar, like a guild of beggars. But there was one beggar that was a dark friend who actually planned the attack. Um, I don't know if you get a point of view, but he does pop up a couple times after this. So after he was attacked, he's he returns back to the inn, the Wandering Woman, and he's informed that a gilded woman is in his room, and it's Brigida. Um, and I really like this part. So they begin to talk, and he remembers Brigida from Falma when he
Yeah.
had blown the horn. And
And
we
he
got to
summoned them
remember,
all.
yeah, he summoned her, but we got to also remember at that point in time, like his memories were a little bit iffy.
Yeah, they were rubbish.
So that's why it took him a little bit to remember this.
Mm.
So they have a conversation, and I know during that conversation, Brigida asks him, it's like, well, I think she asked him, like, what language are you speaking in? And he's like, oh, I'm talking in Old Tongue. So they talk about what happened at Falma, and they genuinely like each other, it seems, and they continue their conversation in the bar,
Yeah, of
drinking the
course they
night.
do.
Yeah, drinking the night away. So.
I love the fact that she becomes his drinking buddy. I love it. It's just
Yeah,
so, because none of the others would ever do that with him. The
yeah, it
girls.
fits. It fits. It's funny too because, like during some of the conversations, like Matt noticed that she always has her eye like on the ugliest dude in the bar, and he's like, "Okay, I guess that rules me out."
Reverse compliment.
Yeah. So, next we
Wait,
get.
who was that? Sorry, who was that character in the scene before with Matt that you said Bellorn or something like that? Sorry,
Oh, Beslan, he's the
Beslan.
prince. He's the
Yeah.
prince of Abu Dhar.
Yeah,
Okay.
Beslan
So
is Tylen's son, who's like a philanderer and womanizer, just
and
like
just
Matt is.
duelist. Just killed someone yesterday by accident.
Oh, okay. By accident.
Because
Yeah,
he was
by
like, I was having a
accident.
duel with them, but it got it. I just couldn't. I didn't mean to kill him, but I did. And his mom's like, oh no. Like it's like like I was saying, Dusty. Like they treat like accidentally killing someone in a duel like as if you were just playing football and you accidentally kind of like sprained someone's ankle in a tackle. It's like, anyway, carry on. So is it Nynaeve now?
Yeah, it's Nynaeve.
Or the Super Girls at least?
Yeah, it's going to be the Supergirl. So it's Nynaeve, Elaine, Avienda.
Yeah.
So they're all together, and there was like some big old ball that was going on
Because it's
called.
Swerve Night.
Yeah, so they were. They did not go to this, and Nynaeve, the spider sense tingles. She has that storm coming
Yeah.
sense. Like whenever she feels something that's it's not doesn't necessarily have to be like an actual weather event.
Yeah. Not
It's
anymore.
kind of like I guess her version of like dice rolling,
Yeah.
I guess. So she feels something that's coming on, Um, and Elaine is acting strange as hell. And what strange means is she's acting like she's drunk.
Even though she's not drunk anything.
No, she hasn't drinking a drop of alcohol, but she's acting like it. And she just starts acting strange. She dances around the room. Um, and then finally, we do see Tom, which we don't see a whole lot of.
Yeah, but
And
he's just in the background, isn't he?
well, the funny thing here is Elaine starts to use the Mask of Mirrors,
Hmm.
and I think she changes herself into a like a topless sea folk.
Oh, great.
And Tom and Julian are like ogling her, and Nynaeve gets like super pissed off about that.
You're like, what are we
And
supposed to do? We didn't think she was going to do this.
but it's not like it was real, it was just an illusion. So anyway, she was just playing with the mask and mirror. So eventually Brigida enters, and she is quite drunk.
Right.
So
And so they figure out, oh, that's why Elaine's drunk.
yeah, so this is something I guess we learn that
Yeah,
if a
never happened
warder
before.
gets drunk, their Aes Sedai is going to have some type of similar effect.
But it
Um,
seems that they've done it differently, haven't they? Like no one's ever done what Birgitte and Brigitte and Elaine have done, and so it's different. That's what they know, and like they're starting to explore that their bond seems to operate a little differently because they've done woman woman instead of woman man.
yeah, because Elaine does remark that from what she's learned, the bond isn't supposed to work that way. But then again, there hasn't been same-sex um, warder bond before,
Bonds.
so
But also,
it's
like, she's a novice with the bond, isn't she? Like, she hasn't gone through training. Like, so there's
yeah,
ways that we find out later where you can mask the bond, but because she just bonded her without, like, even really being told how to do it, she has, like, zero knowledge of really what the bond's all about.
mhm.
Oh, that's interesting. I totally forgot that wait, do they spell it out explicitly, or is it just implied that if there's a female to female bond, then if they, for example, if one of them, for example, gets drunk, then the other one does too.
In her own point of view, like, Elaine verbalizes that that's what she thinks it is, word for word. She
Okay.
Yeah,
thinks that the fact it's woman woman is what's caused the difference. But one of the
mhm,
beauties of third person limited is Robert Jordan can have the characters say things that aren't strictly true.
Right.
mhm,
But we believe that's the case. That the reason that they share much more and they're like feeling these things, and like later on with the pregnancy, we see that as
mhm.
well. Um,
Yeah,
and with having sex too. But then the thing is that we see this that their relationship seems to be different, and
mhm.
or maybe closer. Is that the right word? In a
It's
way
definitely
that with the
different.
language it
Yeah.
isn't. But that's not. By the way, and again, this is a really cool idea for anyone writing. Is Jordan is a genius because he has a hugely long series here, and one of the ways he keeps us interested is he gives us rewards for having knowledge of read the other books, like, oh, I'm using the water bond, which you all know about because you read the other 6 books. But then he gives us new information. He innovates with it. He develops it. The technology or the spells or the magic or the characters, they all progress, which keep us interested. The water bond, we're like, oh, so there's more to this than we first thought. There's more dynamics to it, and that's interesting. And it's a good
Mhm,
way of rewarding us for our previous knowledge, but keeping us interested in what is to come.
mhm.
Well
And
said.
then next starts a gag that runs through this book. I don't know if we can call it a gag or not, but um, Elaine is starting to adopt Avienda's culture a little bit,
Yeah, trying
and
to.
trying to, because she knows she's going to have to make. She knows that Avienda is part of the, the whole
Rand
or
situation.
something. Yeah, so she wants to make it so that things are going to run a bit smoother. And to do that, she was trying to understand Avienda a bit more and how IEL work in general and how their morality and their cultural systems work. So at this point, Avienda is kind of upset with them for how they treat Matt.
Yeah,
Because
and
Matt
so are all
had
of the readers.
yeah, Matt had rescued them, and they always treat Matt as like a punching bag, and they're always making demands of him. And Avienda basically explains to Elaine that she actually has toe to Matt.
Mhm.
So they start discussing on what they need to do to meet the toe. And one of the first steps Avienda suggests is to apologize. Elaine is open to it, and Avian and Nynaeve is just like, hell no, I'm not gonna apologize to him like at all. So there,
He is the thing
that
for
gets
night.
started. Yeah, that little thing gets started, and we get to see this pop up where they try to. Well, Nynaeve mainly tries to contain herself because she also is going along with this in solidarity with Elaine. So they end the chapter on that. We go to our next chapter, which is Small Sacrifices. And this is Elaine's point of view. So now they're outside of the inn, and they're prepping up to apologize to Matt. And Avienda and Brigida are going to go ahead and watch Jacob, but they're going to Jacob Carradine. If you don't remember, he's the white cloak that isn't a dark friend, and he is in town, and they have to have somebody watching him at all times. So Avienda and Brigida are going to go do that task while under the mask of mirrors.
Which
So
is the white cloak who dies at the beginning of the book?
that's Pedro Nile. He's like
Okay.
the
He
leader.
was he was the boss of the bosses of the boss.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was their leader.
Okay.
And Jacob was at what? He was at odds because he had different orders from the boss. Like his odds from the boss were the opposite from his orders from who was ordering him? I think he was taking orders from a Shamael, right?
But no, he comes to the Dark Friend reunion thing.
Yeah, and that was
And
being run by a
so
Shamael.
yeah, but like everyone gets like I don't know some
Like some type
information.
of well, it's like I think it's some sort of form of compulsion that he surpassed on everybody because he doesn't even know the extent of his orders.
No,
It's like they pop up and he has to follow them because he tries to remember what they are, but at the Dark Friend Social, but he could not remember them.
Hmm.
So
Do we know what they are? I don't remember.
yeah,
Um,
to seek out like the Tavirans.
Okay.
but they're all given something slightly different. Like that's the thing is like
Oh yeah, we don't know his explicit orders. Like he gives them everybody general orders to look for the Taviran, and then he quietly talks to everyone at the Dark Friend Social and gives everybody individual orders. And we don't know. I don't think we were given his individual orders. Like we don't really know what they were.
but he's obviously trying to do something with Matt or Perrin because they
Yeah.
can't touch Rand. They have to not kill Rand, but
Mhm.
they are supposed to kill the other two. And
Mhm.
so yeah, so they go for it.
All right. So at this point, we have Nynaeve and Elaine waiting for Matt to show up. Nynaeve is sulking over it and keeps insisting that she's not going to apologize for her behavior. I think, yeah, Nynaeve's is probably the most egregious. Like she's just kind of a sour person in general.
I don't know if Naeve's sorry. She just has a very specific way of looking at life, and she sees herself as the parent, and like I shouldn't, because if I do, it's going to undermine me for the future, and like
Yeah.
yeah. So she just has she's still got a wrong point of view, and she needs to accept that these people who are only a couple of years younger than her are now, in some ways, beyond her, and that's a hard thing for her to adjust to.
Mm-hmm. So Matt shows up, they talk, and she basically Elaine basically leads the conversation. She apologizes and lets Matt know like the conditions in which she'll operate. So she agrees to accept bodyguards, and she agrees not to give him orders and to always ask for advice. Eventually, Nynaeve agrees under duress with that as well, and then Elaine then asks Matt to let them know that what had been looking for, which was that bowl, and he gives them more direction about where it might be, and they convince Matt to move into the palace, which causes some other problems.
Yeah, for Matt.
He agrees, and when he agrees to do this, the dice stop rolling.
Yeah.
And when he learns that Tylan picked his room out, he's kind of apprehensive about that.
Yeah.
And then they leave Matt's room. Okay, so here's another thing that happens. They leave Matt's room, and Mistress Anon shows up. So Satella Anon is the owner of this tavern that they're at. And she tells them that they're going to bring Matt trouble, because she really likes Matt as a person, or as a
And
customer.
gets really creepy about it.
And she says that, tells them to stop pretending to be Aes Sedai. And she makes the assumption, by the way they look, that Elaine would be too young to be one. But she also thinks that Nynaeve is also pretending as well. So Nynaeve, they have a conversation where she says that there are women like her, but they need to be on the DL about claiming that they're Aes Sedai, because they're going to get caught and sent back to the tower or whatnot. So I guess Nynaeve cooks up the idea that maybe she could lead us to some more info about the bowl. So she asks, she plays into it and has Satella Anon lead them to who we will know as the kin.
Yes.
All right, so we're on to the next chapter now. It's going to be 23, and it's next door to a weaver. In this chapter, there is a lot of walking about the city and observations about walking about the city.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, it's taking them a long-ass time to meet these people. I guess Robert Jordan just wanted to create like I don't know what you would call this chapter, but they just walk around forever, and
I think he there's a couple. I mean, you can definitely say that he takes too long here. That's definitely true. But one of the things I think that he was going for is, one, he does love setting his scene and letting you know about like all his cool descriptions of what things look like, etc. But I think the second advantage to this is similar to what Tolkien does with Frodo and Sam, who spend an inordinate amount of time wandering around dark and lonely wastes trying to get to Mordor. And it's part of it is that when it goes on for a long time, you really get the feeling like they do of, oh my goodness, this is never going to end. We're never going to actually get anywhere. And that really does put across the feeling of how like they were feeling like we're just lost in this huge city that we don't know. Crap, we're never going to find this. And
Yeah.
when you get a bit bored, that gives you the feeling of basically how they're feeling, a bit bored.
I
Yeah.
get that sense. I get that sense personally a lot more from Sam and Frodo's journey. The way you described it, that was a really apt description. I think like you think after a while, like, are they ever gonna get to Mordor? But it's not, like, for me at least, it's not a thing about being bored or impatient about it. It's like more like that part of it that you were saying about how it gives you more of a sense of how they feel, like, are we ever going to get to Mordor? And they have more and more doubt as the journey progresses about whether they'll actually even be able to destroy the ring and whether they'll actually even survive.
Right.
Yeah. So walking through the city, making observations. I don't know. The only key information I think maybe in this was it really the key? I think it was mostly just colorful stuff to describe what's going on in the city, and that's about it. I know she stops at a bunch of inns, and they make the assumption that she's making it hard for them to continue to masquerade supposedly as Aes Sedai by being an informant. But yeah, that's it for this chapter. And this chapter, what was it called? Well, let me get into the next chapter. So the next chapter is the interesting bit, and that is called The Kin.
Finally.
Quite simple. So this is actually from the point of view from one of the kin. I think how you say it's Rihanna. I think it's Rihanna because I think all of the names that end with E are not silent in the Jordan universe.
Oh, so this isn't the famous pop star?
No. I thought it sounds like that's what they're Rihanna. I was like Rihanna. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So she is watching Nynaeve and Elaine enter the kin house, and she describes some of the other members of the kin through her eyes, and she sees these two, and they start to question them and interrogate them. And they start asking them questions about locations in the tower. And these were all basically novice level questions. So Nynaeve was having a hard time answering some of these because she was never a novice. But Elaine does cover for her for many of those questions. Eventually, it seems that the kin come to the agreement that these are escaped novices of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the cool thing because we're like, oh, they're wilders, and then we're like, oh no, the reason they're a little bit different is because they do have that kind of leftover feelings. And when you find out, like we were introduced a little bit to how they treat the novices, you're like, why don't more of them leave? And like, oh, they have, they have left. Significant numbers of them have left. So yeah.
Yeah. So after that, we go back into Nynaeve's point of view, and because this was Elaine wanted to have, because Nynaeve was having apprehensions when they were going through the city for so long. They're like, what the hell? This is not going to do anything.
You really love that chapter, don't you, Dusty?
No, I hate it. But Elaine, Nynaeve was like, okay, this persistence has paid off, and having Anon lead them around endlessly was actually a good idea. Elaine wonders out loud how old Rihanna is because her gray hair is showing.
Which
And
means
we
that she
find-
must be significantly old because she knows that she uses the power.
Yeah, but at this point it's not clear. Like, she has to be old But
not how old.
yeah, we don't know how old, because the crazy thing is right now we don't know the difference between someone who's under the oath rod or not.
No, we don't even know
So
that has an effect
yeah,
at
so
this
she's
moment.
actually significantly older than all the Aes Sedai in the White Tower.
Yeah,
She is basically one of the oldest channelers living.
one of the oldest people living.
One of the oldest people living.
Yeah,
Yeah.
bar none.
But she's older than Cad Swain.
Yeah,
Like probably around twice as old. Because Cad Swain, if she was put under the oath rod, doesn't the oath rod basically half the lifespan?
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
yeah. But they didn't realize that. Like, but yeah, that's what it appears. Because and again, as we get further in, and we start investigating the Age of Legends, we think that the oath rod, from what we're told, is basically a punishment. Like it was used to bind criminals, and so like it wasn't never meant to be like a beneficial thing. And so yeah, it makes sense that basically putting people under the oath rod would would limit them and not allow the power to flow through them as freely, therefore causing a different kind of constraint, and that constraint limits their life.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they also noticed that the power dynamics between these Aes Sedai are quite different. Well, I'm not saying Aes Sedai, the kin.
Yeah, they're not based on who's strongest.
No, it looks to be based off of like seniority,
Age.
not on strength, age. And then I know we do get to see too one of the mechanics behind Nynaeve being shielded by someone much, much weaker than her. And we're talking about at the very lowest powers of what would be considered an Aes Sedai. So she gets shielded and she's like, no problem, I'll just break out of this thing. And it looks like this shielding is something she had never encountered. So it looks like there are things that they can learn from these kin, that they kind of use some of their powers a little outside the box. But
Yeah.
I don't know if it's indicated that the way that these shields are made from this kin are actually in a talent or something that could be learned. I don't quite remember.
The thing the thing about the kin shield is it's not a hard shield; it's stretchy. And so, like, even though like Nynaeve and Elaine are all more powerful than the kin they come up against, they're like, oh, I'll just break your shield. Oh, wait a minute, I can't, even though you're weaker than me. And one of the things that this foreshadows is that Jordan is showing that the Aes Sedai's method has some merit, but it's actually very restrictive. Like, because the Aes Sedai believe you teach one way, do it like this, do it like we tell you, and whenever the sisters learn something new with the power, they hide it. So, like, because it's an advantage. So, like, Moraine had her eavesdropping thing, but they didn't teach that to the novices. They all kept it for herself, so only she knows it. And Leandrin has her little compulsion trick, and she keeps that to herself and doesn't teach it. Whereas the kin have clearly shared everything that they got. So when someone notices, oh, by the way, did you know you can do this with the power? They're like, no way, I'll do that. And that's one of the things the Supergirls break. Like, because, oh my goodness, I can't even think of her name. Egwene is just like, I'm done with all of that rubbish. You know, I'm done with that. Everyone has to share everything. Every woman who has any power has to be associated with us. Let's just revolutionize the way we do it. And I think that's this is an example of how Robert Jordan saw the strictness of the tower actually limiting its options instead of enhancing them.
Yeah, that's cool. Like, yeah, let's share the knowledge, and these rules that were imposed on us aren't necessarily actually rules
Beneficial.
that are set in stone. Yeah, that are beneficial, and they're not set in stone, and you can circumvent them.
And I think that's possibly a bit of a wry comment by Jordan on the education system as well.
Yeah,
like,
I would say that
adapt. Sorry.
Elaine is definitely the bondsmith. She's trying to unite all of the different channelers.
Yeah, Egwene.
Elaine
Definitely.
and Egwene, yeah, both of
Yeah.
them.
Well, Elaine on a more political level, right, as well, like because she is literally a queen.
Mm. So yeah, so on their way out of the kin house, one of them is struck in the head by a blunted arrow and falls unconscious. And they believe that they're what, cut purses or something like that.
Yeah, but
But
it's
they,
never that simple.
yeah, it's never that simple. So the ploy didn't work because wasn't Nynaeve was still conscious, right?
Mhm.
So she used the channel. She uses basically the one power as a weapon. Doesn't kill him, but definitely uses it like the Force. So she heals Elaine, and they start talking about who might have attacked them. But then they do agree that now they really, really have to go get Matt so that they can go ahead and get this Bowl of the Winds. Because they think that they can know where this Tarangrel stash is.
Yeah, and they decide that Matt will be useful because they're beginning to realize, like, he has something special. Like they do accept that he is Tavern, and so he will, even though they don't think he's as useful as they are, he does have a use.
So next chapter,
Yeah.
Mind Trap. The setting is the Pit
Ooh.
of Doom.
Yeah,
Pitch of doom.
The Pit of Doom.
very melodramatic.
Yes. So Magidian, I believe in the previous chapter she was summoned to Sheo Ghul.
Yeah,
And
after she managed to escape because she'd been captured, like as a punishment.
so she's escorted through it with Shida Haran. And I think it's funny because upon first meeting, most of the Forsaken feel that they're being disrespected by this Murdral, and she's kind of like, what the hell? Like, how dare a Murdral talk to me like this?
Yeah,
Wait, what's Shider Moran?
Shida
he's-
Haran, like a
Shida
super big
Haran.
Murdral.
He's like this weird Murdral that's basically kind of like the voice of Sauron, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that kind of like his equivalent?
Well, the thing is, it's really tricky because it's never stated explicitly, but he's almost like an avatar of the Dark One. We're
Yeah.
not quite sure because it's never actually 100% ever explained.
Yeah.
Not even in the books that Brandon does. Possibly because in the notes it never fully explained to Brandon what Jordan was going to eventually do with him. So I think the closest we get is that he's like a physical manifestation of the Dark One.
Or at least someone that does the Dark One's bidding.
Yeah, and to speak for him.
Yeah. So she's led through the Pit of Doom by Shadowrun, and she is forced, I think, to kneel.
Yep. And the ceiling makes you do that as well.
Yeah, she was walking or crawling through I don't know if it was like an illusion or what, but it seemed like she was being forced to crawl through some pretty nasty stuff because I know she got cut off.
Yeah,
And when she
the
looks
actual
back-
ceiling does that to you, doesn't it? Like the actually spikes out. Like that is the nature of the pit.
It looks like there's fangs coming from the ceiling.
Yeah.
But
and
also
as you
in
go
this
further in, it
case,
forces you down.
Yeah, this one first did the crawl because I remember when Demandred went there, he didn't have to crawl though.
But he had to lower his head.
Yeah.
It's because she's in trouble.
Yeah.
The Dark One does it because she's let him down. She is, it's definitely a manifestation of how poorly he thinks she's done. So he humiliates her in return.
So she's basically told that she is not in
Favor.
high regard, not in favor. And Shadow Ron turns her over to this young-looking man, and she tries attempt to interrogate him. And she sees the saw go across his eyes, and she's like, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
Okay. So he was chosen to use this power, so that's a kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
So, after she was rude to him, he basically shows her, like a device, right? And she
Yep.
instantly recognizes it as a mind
A
trap.
mind trap.
So, how would you describe a mind trap?
Basically, I think the simplest way is it just gives that other person complete control and power over you to kill you at any moment. It's not just your life that is in jeopardy, though, it's your very soul. So
Okay.
basically, they get given your soul as a toy. And so basically, you must do not only everything that they say, but you almost have to think what they want you to think. Because the key thing with the Forsaken is the Forsaken are not entirely afraid of death, because they know if they die, they can be reborn. But if you're destroyed by a mind trap, you're not dying. Your soul itself is being obliterated.
Okay.
So it's meant to be something that is specifically very threatening, even to people who can normally be reborn.
Okay.
Okay.
So at this point, Moradin controls this mind trap, so that means he's in complete control of Mogideon.
Yeah, basically she's his now.
He also mentions to her that she has not been demoted or anything. She just will have to do everything that Moradin wills, right?
So he's been promoted. She's still Forsaken, but it definitely suggests that he's more than just Forsaken now.
Yeah, so he basically explains to her her autonomy as a chosen has been removed. She's still one, but she's no longer allowed to scheme on her own. She's just going to act on behalf of Moradin.
Yeah.
And this is a promotion?
I think it is for him. I think he has been
Ableist.
placed above the others now.
Yeah. So it's basically because he can use Saw, he has been chosen by the Dark One, which basically means that he's right
Going to
in
be
line
nameless.
to become nameless.
So
All
like
right.
the top dog, which is what they've all been supposedly fighting for. Like the Dark One's kind of like thrown that in the ring as like their incentive. So he's trying to resist actually saying it outright, but I think this is a pretty clear point that this is where it's going.
He doesn't organize his people very well.
No, but don't you think that's part of Jordan's point? Is that working together is almost always better than this stupid over-competitive crap?
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely think that's part of like what Robert Jordan was saying, because especially in things like sales, they'll often do that, won't they? Like, oh, we're going to reward the ones who do well and penalize and humiliate people who don't do well to kind of encourage. That's a good encouragement tactic. And Jordan clearly feels that cooperative working and mutual promotion is a better situation.
That's a good analogy too, because sales are about manipulating people into buying something from you in a similar way that that the bad guys want to manipulate each other and all like Rand and the Supergirls and everyone else, and like you said, it doesn't work as well as working together.
Yeah, and that's definitely what Jordan thought, and that's definitely why Jordan tries to show it the way he does. He like that's a message that he gives.
Yeah.
All right, so we can go on the next chapter. I find this chapter pretty interesting. It's called the Irrevocable Words. So we're back in Margaiz. This is post-death of Pedron Nile. So the people who are the top dogs now always wanted to torture Margaiz, and she is being tortured at this point. So she's resting, but it's hinted that she had been tortured. and she is also was forced to bed Valda.
Yeah,
So
basically that because like with Niall, she was like a hostage, but she was like being treated,
respect,
yeah,
with
like
respect.
as a noble hostage. It was all like a yes, of course, you'll come with me for tea, and she knew she couldn't say no, but it was that. Now Valda just was like, no, I've got you exactly where I want you, and you're a pretty woman, and you're a queen, and I'm just going to take every advantage of that. And so it's basically intimated that he's basically raping her, but
Hmm.
she's allowing it because she knows there is no out, and so
Hmm.
Wait,
and
who exactly is Valda again?
he is a high up White Cloak, and now that Pedro Nial is dead, he's kind of stepped up to take his place.
Hmm.
Okay.
So yes, so Margaiz is kind of in a bad place. Brienne, who was, I guess she was one of the people that she fled with when she left. Um, so she fled with who? Was Brienne, Taladvor, and Brienne's
Yeah, and the
boyfriend or
and Basil
whatever, and
Gill,
Basil Gill.
the
So
innkeeper.
Brienne talks very directly and harshly to Margaiz, basically telling her that she's being a coward and a pussy or whatever. Of course, Margaiz is upset that someone of her station would be talking to her like that, but it does kind of snap her back into reality because um, she is their leader. Um, she has to take control and give them commands and resist and do something, but she
Yeah,
hasn't been doing that lately. She has been getting tortured and crap like that, but she still has people that rely on her and follow her for direction. Because the others have not been tortured. They're just
no,
kind of there.
and she clearly wants to keep it that way.
Yeah, she's kind of also trying to hide this from her followers, but
Yeah, because she
it's
doesn't want to be weak.
apparent. Yeah, she doesn't want to appear weak in front of them, and she is kind of stoically taking it
Yeah,
on.
she is. It isn't breaking her.
No, not quite. So it's she's able to handle it, but her her followers, the people that fled with her, are looking for some guidance, and they don't need what they're seeing right now. So eventually, um, Talonvor and Basil come into the room, and they explain they saw something strange. They say that they saw like a giant bird thing and some guy climb off of it after it landed. And so what happens is a battle starts to erupt, and of course we know who it is. It's the Shan Chan. They're the only ones who have flying mounted beasts. So one thing that happens, because Margais was tower trained, so she can actually sense when people are using the one power. So at first she thinks it's like Aes Sedai attacking, but what ends up happening is Shan Chan's soldiers arrive, and immediately she notices she doesn't really know who these people are. And then we see Lady Suroth again. So Lady Suroth, she's a dark friend, right?
Yeah, but we don't know that yet. She's
No,
yeah,
we
she's.
know it. We do know it because
Do we know that
remember,
now?
well, remember, wasn't Lady Suroth the one that met Leandrin?
So yeah, that's already happened then.
Yeah, we know that she's a dark friend. So um, Lady Suroth meets with Morghese and actually gives her proper deference. And she was actually about to reprimand one of her underlings for not treating her Morghese with respect.
Right.
So we get to see, she kind of explains what they're doing there and how they're the descendants of Arthur Hawkwing and all that. And that
Yeah, and
they're
so
there
they
to,
see themselves as not actually invaders, but returning to reclaim what has always been theirs.
yeah, so they're returning as the rightful owners of those lands. And Sir Roth makes a display of power by um, showing that she has the Panarch under her thumb.
Yeah. The Panarch of Tarabon.
The funny thing is that the Panarch has had such a bad rap. Like the first time we meet the Panarch, she's being manipulated by the Black Aja,
Yeah,
and
she's
now
always under someone's thumb. She has nothing.
and then now she's like hopping and dancing around for Suroth. Um, so we get to learn kind of about the slave culture in Shanchan. They call them Daco Vale.
Dakoval, yeah.
Yeah, and Thera, who was Amathera, has been made Dakovel, which is a servant or slave in Shanchan culture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Property.
Yeah.
They're literally treated like a chair.
So
Do
in
you,
order,
do you guys know? Sorry, like which different cultures have slavery in Wheel of Time, or do all of them, or
No,
is it not?
No.
completely-
It's very, very few do. In Randland, there is no slavery. Like, okay, none
Okay.
whatsoever.
well,
So,
we don't. Was there slavery in Shara?
No, but Shara isn't Randland. They're like, sorry, what I mean is when I say Randland, I mean the Westlands.
Oh,
So, like,
Westlands, the wetlands.
where the
Yeah.
Westlands are, there's tons of different countries. None of them have slavery or any real concept of it. Like, it's not
Okay.
like we used to do this 20 years ago and we don't now. It's like no slavery. The idea of owning a person is like a non-thing.
Okay.
Come on, let me go with this. The Aiel, they have the concept of Gaishan, where you can be a Gaishan to a person but again, it's voluntary. The person's doing that because they have such thought that they would voluntarily, for a year and a day, be your servant. But they are very clearly, in the Aiel's view, not slaves. Like, they would be embarrassed and humiliated if you thought they were slaves. This shows that you don't understand. In
Okay.
Shara, there does appear to be a form of slavery. We don't know much about it, but everyone who can channel is a slave of some kind in Shara, it seems, because they have special tattoos. But we know extremely little canon about Shara because the books never go there.
Mhm.
In Shonchan, everyone who can be trained to channel but doesn't spontaneously do so becomes a Soldam, which is a Damne handler, and all Damne are a kind of Dakoval. All
Right.
Damne are property.
Okay.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so Shanchan definitely they are
they are the slavery people.
Yeah, they're explicit with their slavery, and
And it's
so
portrayed as bad.
yeah,
Yes.
for sure.
Like universally bad.
So Suroth basically explains to Morghese that she should just that she swear fealty to the Sanchan.
Mm-hmm.
This creates a major issue because she is the head of state, and if she does that, that could spell disaster for her kingdom. So
But if she
instead
doesn't
of
do that, it
no,
can be bad.
instead of swearing fealty, well, I think she does. I'm not sure if she does, but one thing I do know that she does do is she renounces her throne quietly.
Yep. She
To
makes herself not queen.
Mhm.
Because then she can't. She can't give Andor to them if she's not queen.
Mm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Game of
But
Thrones.
but yeah, she utters some type of legal thing that causes
The irrevocable words.
Yeah, those are the words that we're talking about. So she renounces her throne and gives it up to Elaine.
Well, she hopes to, Elaine.
Hopes to, yeah. So after she renounces the throne, Balwer shows up, and this is after the Shan Chan have left her alone. Balwer shows up and organizes an escape to leave Amadesia. So this is pretty crazy. The Shan Chan's, I'm sorry, the seat of power for the White Cloaks just got screwed up by the Shan Chan.
Yeah, completely.
It's a major power shift here.
Yeah.
All right, so next chapter, To Be Alone, we get back into Perrin, and he's at a Carrion at the moment. But he's being prepared to leave. This is one of the things that really, really threw me off here. When I was reading it, I was thinking, was this a ploy, or is Rand genuinely being this much of a bastard right now?
I think it's suggested that it's a ploy. But yeah. When Rand, what do you mean when he throws him?
Yeah, he throws him
across
using the
the room.
power against the wall, and he draws blood.
Yeah, I think it's mentioned later that it's a deliberate almost pretend falling out so that he can ensure that Perrin is distanced from him, because I think he realizes that he's doing this whole hardening business.
Yeah.
And it's
That
this
lasts
idea
for
of,
way too long until he finally redeems himself and
Well-
meets that character arc.
yeah, and I think part of it again, Andrew, and again, this is an interesting thing actually. I wonder what your thoughts are here. Is that part of it is that he can't redeem himself, that he needs other people to support him even when he's being ridiculous, but also to tell him hard truths. And it's only through those other people, specifically people like Egwene, Kadsun, but especially, and this is what I love, I think the conversation he has with Tam, who is not a super powerful person, who is not a channeler, who's just his surrogate dad. I say just. And then he has this conversation with him, and then he looks within himself and finds that inner strength to change. And I think that's really an important message of these books.
Yeah.
Yeah, it ties more into what you mentioned before, which is that we can more effectively achieve our mission when we work together. So it's like he knows that he can't redeem himself unless he can rely on his friends who trust him, who he endlessly wants to try to protect, so he alienates himself from them until he finally accepts that that they really support him and they want to help him and they're willing to sacrifice for him, and that's the only way that they can actually defeat the Dark One.
Agreed. I definitely think that's the point.
Well, okay. I don't know. I was really.
It is. I don't think
it was upsetting. Just to see
harsh.
them.
He doesn't pull any punches, does he?
Yeah. So, well, we got to think about the reason too. One of the reasons that this came to this is because Perrin objected to the way that the Aes Sedai were being treated, right?
Yeah.
But I think really Perrin was trying to save Rand.
Yeah, get him, moderate him.
Sense. Yeah, didn't want him to turn to the dark side or something like that.
Too late.
He's concerned about Rand's mental health. But we've seen that he's one of the friends who has always been concerned about Rand's mental health. And he's kind of one of the ones that's more aware of it.
Agreed.
Because his senses can smell out what's really going on underneath everything, because he might act one way and then he smells like something else.
And he's also one of the few people who remembers what Rand was like when he was just Rand, right? Before he was the dragon.
Yeah. So on the way out, Perrin is actually being exiled, I guess, from Carrion. I don't know if it's exiled, but he's been ordered to leave the city. And he does so. So on the way out, he asks Loyal if he wants to go, and Loyal announces that he actually needs to go to each steading and work on closing the way gates at least, because they're being used by shadow spawn.
Yep.
So Perrin wants him to make sure not to keep quiet about these things, because you don't know who's listening in.
Yeah.
So Perrin leaves, and he doesn't believe that he and Laura will cross paths again. But then he leaves. He meets Fael at the north part of the city, and Berelane's going with them, so that of course causes some tension.
Yeah, great choice.
Yeah. So he's taking all the Two Rivers men with him, some manners, and some Aiel, and some wise ones. So he's been given a considerable force. So I'm like, what is he going to do with all these people? And we do know that Rand had been trying to convince Perrin to be like a general. So this is why I was thinking, okay, was this a ploy
Yeah.
or what? Because he's actually going, like he had been resisting this whole time to go away from Rand and to become a general and fight this battle. But now it looks like he's amassing forces.
Yep.
So at this point, I was like a little bit confused.
Yeah. No, I think it is exactly that.
Yeah. So either that, or he genuinely wants to be on Rand's good side, and you know, it's really hard to determine. It was hard for me to determine like what was going on here. But again, it gets a little bit less in the last chapter of the book, where this scene kind of comes to fruition, which we'll get to in the next chat after this, because it does get a little bit resolved in that last chapter of the book. But he gathers all these forces, and they actually use gateways, and they go ahead and they travel to Geodon. So one of the things that he's going to take care of and has been tasked with is to deal with the prophet.
Oh, the prophet.
Which is Massima.
Yeah.
All these damn characters, right?
Yeah.
Hey, who's Massima now?
Massima was right back at the very beginning when they go to the Eye of the World. They go through Shinar, and a bunch of like the soldiers from Shinar who left Shinar with them, like became very devoted to Rand, especially after Falme, where they saw him go like full, like in the sky, flaming sword, superhero version, and they're like, oh my goodness, this guy freaking is the dragon. And so like Uno was one of them, and Massima was one of the others. But whereas the others kind of retain their normalcy, Massima becomes like a fanatical believer in Rand as the dragon.
Oh, okay. I remembered Uno, but not Massima.
Yeah. But he was only very, very minor. Like, this is like when we talk about the 300,000 characters in his books. And that's one of the problems, is that he names every door guard and innkeeper, and then he brings them back 3 books later, and he's like, haha, you'll remember this person. They were on like 2 pages and had no dialogue. It's like, but he's like, foreshadowing. I'm like, Jordan, you devil.
When I've talked to people who aren't into fantasy books about these books, I tell them about this stuff, and they say, why do you read books that are so much work? And I said, well, because it's fun. It's like solving a puzzle.
Yeah. And the thing is that like he does pay it off, like well, not all the time, but there are like, you do get a feeling of, my goodness, like I know stuff about this world, and it's cool. And then when someone comes up and you're like, oh my goodness, he showed me that person. But the fact that not everyone who comes up is important means that it makes it mysterious. Because like, when you watch like a whodunit series on TV, like, Bones or Psych or something, there's only so much time in a 30-minute program to show you people. So the killer's got to be one of the people who they gave you a name and a bit of backstory on. Yeah. So it kind of already limits. But the thing is that Jordan gives you so many people that he gives names to that it starts to make it really difficult to figure out who's doing what, and it makes it a proper puzzle because just because they've got a name does not mean they're important because he does it to so freaking many, which is cool, but it puts people off the books.
Yeah.
It does. For some people it's a bug, for others it's a feature.
I think the for me at least at first it's a bug, and then the more times you read the books, the more it becomes a feature instead of a bug.
Yeah, agreed. I loved it. Anyway,
Do you get kicked out there, Dusty?
yeah, he's been out twice now.
Okay, here we go.
Welcome back.
It's just internet stuff. Okay. So yeah, their mission, bring in the prophet. And the reason why Berylane is there is to be a diplomat, to show that, what's the name of the Queen of Gildon?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, she's there to convince the Queen that they're not an invading force, they're simply there to grab the prophet and bring him the Rand. All right, and then we can go to the next chapter, chapter 28. It's bread and cheese, a very good combination. And we got
fantasy stories.
we got Matt. He's recovering from his bender with Brigida, and he has agreed to move into the palace. And he's letting his peeps know what's going on. So he lets Vannon know that he's going to continue to observe Jacob Carradin's place and take notes of who's there. And Matt finds his rooms to be quite nice. The only problem he's having is that they're too close to Tylen's rooms.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
Set up to be a fuck buddy. That's what.
Yeah.
well, yeah, Tylen is basically what's his name's what's the dude's name from American Pie?
I don't
Which
know. I
one?
don't watch it.
Which
Who?
one? Which one?
Basically, Tylen is Stifler's mom.
Oh, right.
Okay. Stifler's mom. Yeah.
So Tylen enters the room and starts sexually assaulting Matt.
Yeah.
And he
Matt
tries
doesn't
to.
know what to do with it.
Did you
No.
listen to the Watt spoilers episode about this chapter?
I have not yet. I will though.
It's one that includes two women, and they're talking about how much it's so fucking creepy that she basically rapes him.
Yeah.
She does.
Yeah.
And she rapes him at knife point.
Yeah, she does too. Like, give me your dick.
But the thing
It's so
is,
weird.
one of the things is, it is, and one of the points I think here is that it's really interesting because one of the things that makes it like even more unusual is because of the gender swap. Like this kind of scene of where someone is implying pressure to result in a sexual favors, we see it frequently in fiction, male on female. It's portrayed as bad, but it's seen frequently. And one of the things I think that Jordan does here is he's like, this could happen the other way. And the very fact that we all feel like an extra uncomfortableness to it just shows us how much the culture has affected us.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like
that's really a cool point.
Like you said, that gender reversal, like how there's the matriarchy instead of a patriarchy in the Wheel of Time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So before anything significant happens, Tom and Julian arrive. I believe Tom knows what's up. You know, he's been around the block.
Mhm.
He sees like Matt half dressed, and Tylen is like masterfully looks normal. So I think like Tom's probably so informed that he probably already knows about this fetish that Tylen has here. So when they show up, they they let Matt know that there are other women that they find that use the one power to disguise themselves. Matt puts two and two together, and he's like, "Dang it! That's why they're getting out of my nose all the time. They're doing some type of disguise using the one power." So after that, he hears that Elaine and Nynaeve had been out and about using this, and Elaine and Nynaeve actually come back, and they want Matt to stake out the Kin house.
Hmm.
So eventually, nothing really happens, and when he comes back to the palace, he finds a note from Tylen asking him
Listen, bitch,
to
get
dinner.
yourself ready for fucking.
Well, not so explicit, but you know,
Basically, you're not getting away.
yeah. So when he sees the note, he's like, "Hell no!" He locks his door, and he has trouble sleeping
Yeah,
that evening.
I bet.
So next day, he's continued to do his stakeout, and Brigida and Nalessian, who's one of his, I guess he's one of the very first people that was recruited as the Band of the Red Hand.
Yeah.
Um,
Been in there one of the longest, definitely.
yeah, he's like one of the longest standing members. But yeah, they go out and I think they go over to get Oliver, or at least Oliver moved to keep into the palace. And he's actually using Oliver as an excuse to not meet up or be involved with Tylen. Because he's hungry as hell because he's being blocked from the kitchens. She's trying to
Push him.
really push him into having to have dinner. So when he goes and he tries to order food, he gets a no go.
Because they all quietly know what she's doing.
Yeah, so he basically goes hungry for the day. So next morning he wakes up and he hears the dice spinning again. And then we
Dang
go
it.
into the
And he's
next
thinking,
chapter.
crap, I don't want this. This is bad.
Yeah.
Because whenever that happens, he's just like, he can't concentrate, can he? Or like even like messes with his sleep and everything. And remember, the last time that I stopped is when he made the decision to come here. So it's like, now you've done that bit. Now we're off to the next one.
Yeah, so next chapter, we're almost done. It's called The Festival of Birds. This is chapter 29. So he wakes up to the dice. It's going on in his head. And he's like, should I just sleep to get these dice? Because I believe the dice give him like a headache, right?
Yeah, after a while, definitely.
Yeah, so he's like, he wants to sleep the dice off. So he he gets dressed and gets some bread and cheese that he was able to get from Oliver. And then he go ahead and he checks in on Oliver and he tries to figure out why these dice have started up, and he just really has no clue.
No. But it can't
So-
be good.
Yeah, so they both go, they enter the sitting room, and Matt's like, I guess this is like Matt's kind of apartment. So there's like multiple rooms. So they go to the sitting room, and Tylen's sitting there. Of course, Matt's
It's his sugar baby
surprised.
pad.
Huh?
It's his sugar baby pad.
Yeah, but in those kind of palaces, etc., that would be normal. Like for any major, if you have a significant guest, they wouldn't just have a room; they would have a suite.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah, if you're gonna be staying there for a while, right?
Yeah,
So the funny thing is Matt tries to use Oliver as an excuse, and immediately she calls in this lady with Tigo Biggs, and because I know Matt says like, "Oh, it's the biggest boobs he's ever seen" or something. Is this one of Thailand's ladies in waiting or something?
yeah,
And she comes in with like a little mask for Oliver to wear to the festival, and she eliminates Oliver as an excuse, and
Yeah.
Oliver happily goes along with it because it's obvious too that Oliver likes ogling women, or he's
yeah.
kind of
And people constantly say it's like kind of because Matt's a bad influence, but it's hard to tell. It seems like everyone's a bad influence.
yeah. Yeah, so they go out the door, and Tylen starts her full court press on Matt.
Yeah,
She locks the room so that she can't get out, and she starts to undress him, and then he resists, and finally she rips out a dagger and like and forces him to comply at knife point.
yeah,
She instructs him what to do, and he does it. And
Some people
There
are
you
into
go.
that kind of stuff.
yep. And she's one of them.
Yeah.
and he knows that if a woman is brandishing a knife in Abu Dar, you better listen to what she says.
Yeah, they're
And
not
he's not
kicking
gonna.
around.
Yeah, he's not gonna attack a queen. He's just gonna do what he needs to do.
Yeah,
So anyway, I think we get the idea that some type of S&M scene happens,
yep,
and it's we could tell that they got it on or whatever. And he's at the end, he's like smoking a pipe, like the after sex cigarette.
yeah,
And he's wearing like nothing but the medallion and his scarf covering the
absolutely.
scar.
The foxhead medallion, never to be without it.
So one thing she says to him is like, paraphrasing, is she doesn't understand why he was resisting so much when they ended up having as much fun as she did. And he basically, from what he's taught and his culture has told him, that he's supposed to be the one pursuing the relationship.
Yeah,
And then
You should pick.
she says that's not a possibility with her. She's not going to be chased.
yeah. She's like, I'm going to be the chaser.
Yeah.
And so one of the things again about this is that it's suggested that Matt has been sometimes overly flirtatious and seen reluctant women as just someone to go after even harder. Not that he would ever do what Tylen's done, but
No.
But definitely that he is like that he's gone out hunting, as it were. Okay, and so this is
Like
is
I did
actually
in my 20s.
an opportunity for him to realize, oh, this wasn't so much fun, even though it was in one sense, it wasn't in another. And so, yeah, I think it's been useful, a horrible experience, but a useful one for him to understand that how you might end up feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I didn't
Yeah, we
realize
did
that
get a.
before.
There's a weird scene because right after that, when Tylen leaves,
Yeah,
Matt tries to stop himself from weeping.
yeah.
So he definitely
Stockholm
feels
syndrome.
violated, but I don't know. It's
But he
pretty
also
bad.
has, but he obviously has some kind of sadness about it because later on, when things go badly for Thailand, he does care about that as well.
Yeah, I just think I don't know.
It's tricky.
Yeah, it is tricky. Like he was forced into it,
Yep.
but then again, I guess he enjoyed himself during the act, but then he also felt that he shouldn't be the one who has less power in the situation. I don't
Correct.
know.
Hmm.
And but I think it's meant to be not clear. I think it's meant to be
Mhm.
confusing and manipulative and a lot of different things because I think those kind of power plays, even if they're not as blatant as what's just happened here, I think those are confusing situations where people can give themselves all sorts of mixed messages, and both perpetrator and victim can believe things that are untrue,
Mhm.
logically speaking, but are in their emotions. So
Yeah.
it's yeah. So I don't think Jordan here is necessarily preaching to us. I think he's telling us a story and then saying, "You decide. What do you think about this?" I'm asking you some difficult questions here. You
Mm-hmm.
know, where do you go with this? And I'm kind of pleased in a way that he doesn't just ever like make it clear that, well, now Matt hates her because she raped him. That statement is never made, and
Mm-hmm.
Matt never fully sees it that way because I think these things are confusing. But it's good that he's allowed the audience to discuss this very, very important topic in
Mm-hmm.
a somewhat safe environment of fiction.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like that he does that. That he doesn't like shove his moralizing down your
Yeah,
throat and demand that you have this particular interpretation. It's fun
correct.
to kind of like debate about different interpretations with people too. Like
Mhm.
I actually honestly didn't even
See,
take that part with Matt as seriously as you guys. I guess because like I'm so subjected to the double standard in our
yeah,
culture, where I mostly just thought it was a funny part. So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
and it is played a little bit for that, and I think that is part of Jordan's comment on double standard. But I just want to say, Andrew, the first time I read it, I don't think I took it like that either. I think I took it far more like you. I think I've been subjected to so many Wack chats and what message boards on which women in particular have emphasized that point that I can't not see it because
right.
I've been in so many of these kind of conversations. But I don't think on first reading, this wasn't my first reading opinion either.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Okay.
So eventually, he gets up, gathers his things and clothes. He finds a gift left by Tylen that calls him Piglet, and instructs him to get
Yeah.
his ears pierced. I'm like, Jesus. And then this is like where he really starts to get upset about what's going on with him
Yeah. Because he's realized he's
because,
been made into a toy.
Yeah,
yeah, like he's losing his agency
Yeah.
basically,
you can be a
which
toy, but
is
there's got to be limits.
what's
Yeah.
interesting about Matt's character is he out of the three, he's like the one with the most agency,
Yeah.
and that's completely getting ruined right now by Thailand forcing him into doing these things. But um, so eventually, after that happens, he meets Brigida and Alessian, and they're both like all dolled up for this bird festival thing. And And Brigida's like looking nice, and Matt's looking at her, and he's like, oh, I see. And he explains like how is she hiding her weapons and that get up and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But she says, I
Knife
don't
in
know
the
if she said,
cleavage, like how women put their phones in their cleavage now.
Yeah,
yeah.
crazy.
So now they meet up with Beslin as well. Beslin isn't all dressed up like everybody else, but he's there. And Beslin just showed up. Matt was like, what's he doing here? Of course, he's at odds with Beslin now because of what's going on with his mom.
And the Sean Chan.
hmm So now the next thing is going on is they're going out in the town, and because Beslin, of course, wants to have fun,
Of course he does.
and they exchange banter. And one of the interesting things that happens um, is that there's another. They get attacked again, right?
Yeah, well, they're in Ebudar, right? So that's all the time.
Yeah. So another beggar attacks him, and what they notice though is that he's not wearing like a beggars guild ring. So that puts, I think it puts Beslin on high alert or something.
Yeah, because
But
there's a guild.
yeah, so we get another beggar on a beggar battle. So we see everyone, they fight. Brigida does her Brigida stuff, and Matt does his Matt stuff. At the very end, they're covered in blood and wounds and stuff. And Matt takes a moment and he's just looking around, and everybody is looking pretty jacked up
Yep.
except Brigida. She's like pristine looking. They don't really explain why. Maybe it's just because she's that much of a badass. Who knows?
Yeah.
So Matt's like talking to Bessa, and he's like, "What's going on with these damn beggars in the city?" It's like, and Beslin just laughs it off, and he says, "Oh, it's because you're Taviran." And Matt was like, my throat was almost slit here." And at this point, the group goes to some place. They drink some bad tea, and they get a bit rested. Now this is like party night or whatever. And here's where it comes. Beslin tells Matt, I think you'll be good for your mother, my mother. And Matt just spits this tea out on the people who are nearby. So he's like, WTF, Beslin knew about all this crap. And he's like feeling super bad because he thinks he's disrespected Beslin this whole time because he basically did his mom,
Stifler definitely does not react that way.
No, he doesn't. No, that's true. Stifler is very upset.
Yeah.
So basically, Beslin explains that Thailand has basically chosen him as, okay, what are we going to call this? A sugar daddy, but not really.
No,
Like
Sugar baby.
he's
Sugar
the opposite.
baby.
He's like a
sugar
toy
baby?
boy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
boy toy or whatever.
Yeah. She's
Yeah.
a sugar mama.
Yeah, she's the old one here, and he's the toy.
Yep.
Yeah, so Matt's face gets super red, and Beslin mistakes it for anger and asks him, "Well, why are you so angry?" And Matt's like, "Oh no, I'm just embarrassed." Um, and then, Beslin is trying to calm things down. She's just my mother. She's not my wife.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that that got simmered down a bit, and this was super funny. I thought this was hilarious. But then again, in the back of my mind, is like, yeah, but at knife point.
And again, if it had been done to a woman, the idea of it being funny would not have happened.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
If it had been an old man doing this to a cute, free-spirited girl.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I think, part of what Jordan's saying, Like, that's what the question he's asking is, does it make a difference?
Yeah. So Matt storms off, and he basically says that he needs to clear his head. And basically that whole, I guess, culture is just giving them a headache, right?
Yeah.
And the dice are still spinning.
Of course they are, because why wouldn't they be?
So, all right, last chapter that we're going to cover today is the first cup. Point of view starts with Elaine. And what is this? So, Marilla is accusing Elaine of something in the presence of all these other Aes Sedai. And the thing that they're accused of is not something that they know was something. They didn't know this. They're new. So they're being accused of seeking out information about the kin, which actually, under Aes Sedai law, is supposed to be prohibited.
Right.
They don't know this. So they're filled in a bit about how the relationship between the kin and the Aes Sedai work. So we get to learn that this whole time they knew about the kin, and Elaine and Nynaeve finds this odd, considering how integral the kin is and how powerful some of their members are.
Is it because they break the rules?
Ooh, the kin?
Yeah.
Or I think the kin was actually unknowingly being used as a way to track down escaped novices.
They were deliberately allowing the kin to survive. They knew about them, and they deliberately left them in place because it meant they knew where they would flee to. And then if they wanted to pick them up, they could. And then the ones that they didn't really want to pick up, like they were leaving the tower and needed to leave because they were never going to make it, they were kind of letting them go. But the problem was they lost track. And actually, many of these kin who they let go thinking they're super weak lived forever and are just still, and the kin think that they are doing it in secret. And so, but actually, it was the Aes Sedai thought they had a handle on it. They did not.
So, and this is they're filled in about what's going on about the kin. Marilla is continuing to berate and treat Nynaeve and Elaine like they are not full sisters.
Yeah.
And this is kind of where it turns around on them. So Elaine gets really pissed off. And this is funny because usually the one that gets pissed off would be Nynaeve. But it is Elaine that basically tells Marilla that they are worthy of respect. And if you are disrespecting us, you are disrespecting the Armelin seat. Because it is Armelin who put us into these positions. Right?
Yeah.
So they are they finally set the table straight here, so that they'll be treated as equals instead of being always talked down to like they're novices. So they all agree that she should be handed authority over the search for these objects. And, well, that's before they explain the kin stuff, and we already kind of covered that. So, eventually, all of the Aes Sedai who had disrespected Elaine, they do apologize. And instead of throwing wrenches and things, they have pledged to help her out on what she is tasked with. She also tells the Aes Sedai that she does not believe that the kin is as small as they think they are, and she believes that they're all actually a pretty large group. And last POV of this chapter, we got Mogideon. All right, so Mogideon spots Nynaeve getting onto a boat. And then she has somebody show her like a roof or something, or lead her up to a roof,
Yeah.
so that she can get a clear view of this boat. So she sees the boat, and she uses balefire to destroy it. But at the same moment that she shoots off this balefire, she gets startled, believing that I think Moradin was there or something. But it just happened to be like a bunch of birds that had startled her. So this caused her not to get a direct hit on the area of the boat she believed Nynaeve to be in.
Yeah.
So instead, the balefire basically splits the boat in two, and the boat sinks.
Yeah.
So at that point, she rushes out, and then she's fearful that she has been uncovered because she made such a brash move.
Yeah.
Like she just fired
normally that isn't what she
balefire.
does. That isn't normally what she does, but she's lost it when it comes to Nynaeve, hasn't she? Like she just hates her.
Yeah, hates her so much that she's willing to risk herself being discovered. Because if you file balefire off, you got to think that every person that could channel is going to feel that.
Yeah, they are. For sure.
And that's how that chapter ends. It's kind of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And of course now Nynaeve is in the water, right?
Yeah, well, that's the next chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So the next chapter kind of, it's, how they do that thing with timing. Like this is the end of one chapter, but the next chapter actually takes place a bit before this event. So yeah, that's what happens with the next chapter, and you get a great reunion scene there, and she makes another accomplishment with her channeling. But we'll get into that next time, because that's the next chapter in the book.
Cool.
All right, guys. This book is considered the slog, at least the start of it.
It's because of like chapters like wandering around Ebudara and stuff. But there's so much. There is so much actually going on. I mean, there really is. And again, like the other thing is that some people don't like the Bold the Wind storyline because they're like, but if there'd never been a drought, there wouldn't need to be a Bold the Winds. He could have just missed out the drought, and he could have missed out Bold Winds. But under that argument, he could have missed out all his problems.
Yeah, I don't mind it because we get some pretty interesting stuff that happens. Like we get the next time we talk, we're going to talk about the encounter with the Golem and the aftermath of Mogideon's balefire.
And it establishes things like the medallion. It establishes things like the oath rod having strange effects. It establishes the kin, which is very important because they actually end up fueling the Aes Sedai army of later books.
Yeah, and we get Rand's second cut in his abdomen. and how that happened. And there's a lot of stuff that happens in the last few chapters. It's up to this. It's not super exciting, but the last few, it starts jumping up in excitement.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think maybe what was it like? Perrin didn't do much. It's like I guess the focus on this book is mainly the girls in Ebudar and Matt.
And Matt, it's a heavy Matt book. And people always say how much they love Matt, and that one of the problems with the slog is that there's a book with very little Matt in it. But here you have a book with loads of Matt in it. So, you know, decide.
But yeah, I think it's probably the walking around in Ebudar for an entire chapter. It's probably those type of chapters that give this book the name of the slog.
Yeah.
At least the start of it. I don't know. I was reading. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, but we're fans. Like we're the kind of people for whom the Wheel of Time worked. There are some people for whom chunks of it did not work, and I think if you're up for a long, in-depth series with lots of intricacy, I think it's absolutely fantastic. If you love world building, and like world building isn't something that you just get through to get the story, but you actually enjoy it in its own right, then Jordan's work just absolutely comes alive for you. But some people, world building is like, it's like the vegetables I need to have with the food I want. Whereas we're people who are actually, we like the vegetables for what they are. Like actually, I actually enjoy the taste of this stuff. I'm not just having it because it's healthy. I'm having it because I actually love it.
Yeah, like I'm not saying that the world building at all is bad. Like,
No.
because there is some world building that was extremely sluggish. Like I could just talk about Lord of the Rings, and anytime they're walking through forests, and he uses like a whole chapter to explain what a forest looks like. That is, to me, a slog. There's nothing really interesting going on except
You're not giving us new information.
Rolling hills and whatnot. But yeah, I guess. And maybe in comparison to the other books, it's not as jam-packed. But even then, like thinking of Lord of Chaos,
there
wasn't really any huge crazy things happening in the book until the very end. There was a lot of political maneuvering and stuff in Lord of Chaos. Most of it was him, talking to the emissaries from the different Aes Sedai camps, and Egwene coming into her own and becoming the Armelin. And there was like some real interesting things that happened, but not on the scale that we're having like a crazy combat or anything every other chapter. It's a bit differently paced that way.
Yeah.
But I think the next chapters are definitely going to be more exciting. I'm actually almost done. I'm like at the last 10 pages or something of the last chapter. Like the last chapter is really abrupt. I'm like, wow, this kind of like ramped everything up without like setting the groundwork. Well, at least the groundwork was set, but it was set so far in ahead that we kind of forgot what was going on. But I thought these were interesting topics, especially the whole Matt and Thailand situation. I think that's probably one of the more interesting things to talk about in this book. Just flipping that on its head.
Yeah.
It's interesting that we don't have as much, I guess, I don't know, like it seems it's not as bad because the gender roles were flipped as if it were a man doing this to a woman.
But that is definitely us being engineered to feel that way by our own experience of like culture and media.
Yeah, for sure.
That's for sure.
Anyway.
All right, so I guess we could go ahead and, as I don't know how much time you have, Tristram, because
it's 3:30, So
Okay, so you're gonna want
I'll probably call it, but hopefully next week we can do some more Mistborn.
Yeah, Will of Ascension.
Yeah, sure.
Next Sunday.
Is it going to be so next Sunday evening, right?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks for inviting me, guys. Enjoy.
All right,
Thanks
man. Thanks for
Always
joining
great
us.
to talk to you, man.
Bye, guys.
All
See
right.
ya. Have
Bye-bye.
a good night.
Okay, so now that we got through our Wheel of Time stuff, was there anything interesting or notable that you read in the last week or so?
Yeah, I read a lot. I'll try to take it in reverse order. I think so right now I'm reading Red Seas Under Red Skies, which is of course Gentleman Bastards book 2. And I like it. It's interesting.
Different, right?
Sorry?
It's different, right?
Yeah. I like how it's kind of like it kind of becomes like fantasy Ocean's 11.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are a little like that, but this one is like Fantasy Ocean's 11 pirate version.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I haven't I guess I'm like less than a third of the way through it so far, so I think a lot more is going to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of. You'll see what I mean by how it's different. Because the first book, he had a lot of deference to their past. So he had a lot of flashback scenes, right, in the first book. And in the second book, like it starts off a bit different, right? I'm trying to remember how it starts off.
I think it starts off with Locke and Jean pointing crossbows at each other, and I think it seems like that's sort of something that actually they come back to later on in the story, because then they kind of jump to a different setting.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, I remember that. Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
Yeah, for sure. I'm reading the Tolkien quiz book, which is interesting just to test my knowledge about Tolkien's work in Lord of the Rings and stuff. It's interesting because like there are all these super specific questions that I have no idea of the answers, and then some of them the answers are really easy. Like what creature was Gollum originally? He was a hobbit. And there are easier questions like that, and then there are harder questions like what was Em and Hen originally named, and for what reason? Huh? I don't fucking know, man.
Yeah, you'd have to read like his journals or something to know that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I finished 2 of the big books that I was reading. I finished Shogun and Rhythm of War.
Oh, I'm almost done with Rhythm of War. I think I got like 10% left.
Cool.
Yeah, the pacing's a bit different in Rhythm of War, right?
Yeah, I thought it was. I liked Oathbringer more. I think it's my favorite book in Stormlight Archive so far because I like the faster pace, and it was like it seemed like there was more action. I did like this one. It's I love this one too, but I like Oathbringer a little bit more. But there, as happens in all the books, there's a lot of interesting stuff that happens in this one too, for sure.
Yeah, there's a huge focus, it seems like, on 2 characters, right? Navani and the singer. What's her name? Vel something?
Oh, I don't remember.
Vel, I forgot her name.
Something like that. Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the focus of this one, and it's interesting because a lot of the books have like flashbacks for some characters, and there weren't really any flashbacks in this book. Oh, actually, there were flashbacks. I'm sorry, there were flashbacks for the singer.
Yeah.
So you got to see but the flashbacks didn't go back that far. It was like the start right before they became Parshendi or whatever, or more form.
Hmm.
So yeah, like the focus was on that character, I guess you could say, since the flashbacks mainly happened with that particular character.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was also gonna note that you were listening to the audiobooks, right?
Yep.
So you know how in the very beginning there's like some type of excerpt of something?
Yep.
Did you notice that one of the voices sounded like what's his name?
Uh,
What's his
ooh,
name from Mistborn? The
I don't know.
I was forget so many damn characters. The Ferrochemist.
Not the Lord Ruler?
No, the Ferrochemist, the one that's their friend,
Um,
the one that's into
oh,
religion.
it's not, it's not, no, it's, Marsh? Is it Marsh?
No,
No,
no, not Marsh.
no.
The Ferrochemist, the guy from the north. What's his name? Terraceman. The Terraceman.
I don't remember.
He's like a major character.
He's one of the, like, original crew in the first Mistborn book?
He's in all of them. He's in all. I think he's in every single Mistborn book.
Okay. I was thinking Sazed or Marsh,
There
but
you go, Sazed.
it's
That's his
Sazed?
name.
Oh, okay.
Well, didn't you listen? It sounded like Sazed's voice. And at the end, he says, "I think," and "I think" was one of Sazed's vocal tics.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
So Sazed, I think, has written some of those little things in the beginning and some of those chapters.
That's entirely possible, especially since we seem to be getting more and more of the Cosmere as Stormlight Archive progresses.
Yeah, like one of those characters explains that there's multiple worlds, and it's being shown. I think Wit outs himself, right? That he's not what everybody thinks, and
Yeah.
he's has access to these worlds and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm looking forward. I'm not done with it yet because it was weird. I was really getting interested in like the Shadesmar stuff, and then they dropped that for like a long time.
Yeah, they had more of that in Oathbringer.
Yeah, there's a lot of Shadesmar in Oathbringer. But yeah, I'm almost done. I think I'll probably be done by tonight or tomorrow.
I think there are 3 Legendarium podcast episodes about it so far, and I think they've only done parts 1 to 4.
On Rhythm of War?
Yeah, and they did 2 episodes on parts 1 and 2.
Oh, okay. Oh, 2 episodes on parts 1 too? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'll look forward to that.
Yeah.
You said you finished that Shogun, right?
Yeah, that was pretty good. I thought it was like I said, it's interesting to see like this European guy adapting to the samurai culture in Japan and in the 1600s, and all the political manipulations and all the religious struggles, and it's happening during a war, and they get attacked by ninjas a few times, and then sometimes
ninjas in it?
yeah, there are ninjas in it twice. It's pretty awesome. And
Okay.
they're like sometimes, like occasionally, it seems like the plot seems to drag for a while, and then all of a sudden, like out of nowhere, something sudden and unexpected and brutal happens. And there's an interesting love story that develops too. So yeah, I'd say it's definitely worth reading. I think I gave it 4 stars.
Okay. Well, I have it on my wait list. I'm just waiting for it to pop up.
Oh, okay.
It looks like it's going to be a while. I think it's like 6 months or something.
Holy shit! Wow.
Yeah, it's being high demand, I guess, and not a whole lot of copies.
It's a long book too, so it probably takes the average person a really long time to read it. I think it's like the copy I have is about 1,150 pages. So it's like Stormlight Archive.
War.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
I also read why we're polarized.
What do you think about that?
I thought it was okay for the most part. I think I kind of already knew a lot of the stuff that he was talking about in the book, but I think for me, the main takeaways that I thought were the best were that, well, one of them was that the average person who's barely politically engaged today knows more than the average person who was a political junkie in 1980. And all the theme about how people are more polarized because the American political parties have become more polarized against each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he also mentions like media diets on how, I guess, and this is funny because I know he describes that the narrowness of the media diet for Republicans versus a little larger media diet for Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
But he also explains how people pay way too much attention to national politics, and I agree wholeheartedly
Yeah, for sure.
with that. That's why when I watch the news at home during our like dinner ritual, we put on the local news. I don't watch any CNN or MSNBC or anything like that. I just want to know what's going around in my city, my town, my area. And he does recommend that at the very end of the book. Just pay more attention to what's happening around you, and like all this national nonsense is not really worth your attention. And I
Right.
agree with that. I think
Yeah,
people just
yeah,
pay
for
way
sure.
too much attention to national politics.
And people get outraged about shit that often, for the most part, doesn't really affect them that much.
Yeah, exactly. Like people getting outraged about Portland when they live on the other side of the country, you know.
Yeah,
It's like, what's the point? And it's used, and people like will use that as an example. Like, oh, Democrats, blah 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 blah. They're gonna turn your cities into blah 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 blah. Or Republicans are gonna make fascism great again, and blah 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 blah. Whatever, man. Pay attention to the shit that's going on around you, and try
yeah,
to like being a keyboard warrior about that shit is not gonna do anything. Like,
yeah,
you know, if you want to affect change, you have an immediate area where you can do that, and that's in your local neighborhood.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I thought it was an interesting book. I thought there were a few things. Like the one thing that he did bring up, Thomas Frank. I know he brought him up.
Oh
And
yeah, I think I've heard him on a few of those, or maybe at least one of those. Yeah, I saw him on Katie Helper's podcast and her Rolling Stone podcast with Matt Taibbi, and also he was on an episode of Crystal Kyle and Friends.
yeah, so he's written some books kind of about that, and I know Matt Taibbi also referenced Thomas Frank in Hate Inc.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I thought it was pretty interesting. I like the message that it sends is that don't be a fucking asshole and just pay attention to your immediate surroundings.
Yeah, yeah,
And I like to see that there's some attention paid to, because I remember the rhetoric that Candace Owens was going on about oh yeah, the Democrats were into slavery and they were the police. I'm like, okay, this is someone that's trying to dupe idiots into people who don't have critical thinking skills. She's preying on them. That's what I think when someone like that says something. And then in this book, he kind of goes through a pretty thorough explanation about how the parties were more diversified, how there were conservative Democrats and there were liberal Republicans. So what happened is there was a split and the parties became more polarized along conservative and liberal. So what happened is all of the conservative Democrats ditched the Democratic Party and they became Republicans. And all of the conservative Democrats were all of the pro-slavery Democrats. Those were all the KKK Democrats.
Yeah.
And then someone saying, "Oh, the Democratic Party is the party of slavery." It just has a very lax understanding of how these parties were constructed back then.
Yeah, because, like, there weren't any Republicans who were pro-slavery. They were all Democrats.
Yeah, and it wasn't really a Republican Democrat thing. It was like a North-South thing. It was a more conservative, like the Dixiecrats were totally into slavery, and they had more control over the Democratic Party. So I don't know. It's just like those very unsophisticated arguments that just shows that Griftus Owens is the master of the grift.
Yep. We'll talk more about Queen Grifter tomorrow. Grifter of the year.
Yeah, Griftus Owens.
Yep.
Let me see how the caption machine says Griftus. Oh, okay, Griftus. I see.
Griftus. Grifter us.
Griftus Owens. Grift Grustus Owens. Craft Days. I see. Anyway, yeah, I'm glad you checked that out. It was short, so I thought, this is short enough. I'll just send that to you.
Yep, didn't take that long to read.
Yeah, and I'm severely lagging here. I think I've only done like a couple books this month. I gotta catch up.
No, yeah.
But yeah, I didn't read. The only thing I've been working on is Rhythm of War, and we really basically already covered that. I guess if we're just going to cover media in general, I started watching Cobra Kai, and
okay.
I'm pretty much hooked. I'm really liking it. What else did I start watching? Cobra Kai, and I started watching this anime based off of it's based off of the Count of Monte Cristo.
Oh, cool.
And I've been really enjoying it. It's not, when you think of anime, you just think of people fighting and screaming and yelling. It's not that. It's like plots and intrigue and backstabbing and all that kind of stuff. I've never actually read The Count of Monte Cristo. I'm kind of like tempted to now that I've been watching this. I'm like, wow, this is pretty cool. But it's an interesting take on that because it's a sci-fi take. So from what I understand, the setting of this version is in 58 or something. So it's like a couple thousand years. They've mastered space travel.
Oh, wow.
But it's still about like the aristocracy. It does take place in France in the future. So I don't know, it's worth checking out. It's free if you have, there's a app or a website called Crunchyroll. It's a bunch of free anime that you just gotta watch ads like periodically. But this is one of the animes that's on there. It's completely free and it's called The Count of Monte Cristo.
Okay, cool. Sorry, I've got to end it abruptly here. I've got to go help my mom there.
No problem, man. So yeah, we'll get back together. I guess next week we're doing the front man and the Ascension, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah,
Well,
so-
Ascension and Best Rock Frontman.
Yeah. So I'm gonna take a break on my channel for that week, and I'll be appearing on Andrew's channel for those two. So please please join us. We will be at Mindgasms next week, both on Saturday and Sunday. So we're going to have like a double feature there. Well, not
Yep.
really, but kind of. But yeah.
Yep. And
And
tomorrow we're going to talk about that Brian Callen and Candace Owens podcast.
yeah, that'll be interesting. And JD is going to be talking with us.
Yep, JD.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and Shizan's probably going to as well.
Oh yeah, he still has to watch it though. I think I'm gonna watch it again sometime before the night ends,
Sure.
just to refresh myself. But all right, please like, subscribe. If you have any comments, please leave them below. I'm always happy to hear your comments, even if it's bullshit advertisements for some
Yeah.
random fucking thing that nobody cares about. I don't care. Comment.
Yeah.
Just ask any questions you like. Feel free to voice your opinion on any of our reads or any of the Wheel of Time stuff that we talked about today, or the short political conversation me and Tristram had in the beginning. But yeah, just let us know your thoughts, comment, share, like, and subscribe, and you have a great night.
All right. Adios until next time, everyone.
Adios. Yeah, it'd be nice if I was completely prepared. There we go. There's that stop streaming button.